Chapter 1. In the depths of the Yunhue Plateau in the southwest of Zhongzhou State, there was a campsite that was destined not to be marked on any map in the vast primeval forest. The entire campsite was built inside the primeval forest. In addition to the trees that could shelter it from the wind and rain, there were only a few undulating mountains around it. Starting from the main gate of the campsite, it took less than 2 kilometers to reach the border between Zhongzhou State and Annan State. It was so remote that it couldn't be more remote. The campsite was small and did not cover a large area. There were about a dozen thatched huts for people to live in and a very small but very clean open-air training ground. In the center of the training ground, a watchtower nearly 10 meters high and a flagpole with the star flag of Zhongzhou State fluttering stood alone. It was the highest place in the entire campsite. But in such an environment, the view from the watchtower was not much better than that from the ground. It was better than nothing. The sun was setting. The last afterglow of the setting sun fell on the training ground of the campsite, and the whole training ground was dim. There was a strong wind at dusk. The violent airflow tore the star flag on the flagpole. The flag fluttered, the wind blew away the clouds, and the whole campsite looked like a desolate and vivid picture. A group of soldiers in military uniforms silently saluted under the star flag, looking solemn and solemn. Among the 40 to 50 soldiers, the leader was a middle-aged man who was about 50 years old. He had a very ordinary appearance and figure, but a pair of extremely spirited and even sharp eyes added a lot to his entire person. He was dressed in military uniform, and although he did not wear a military rank, when his eyes swept around, he appeared especially majestic. The middle-aged man looked at the fluttering star flag above his head and put down his saluting palm after a long time. "Senior Li, go back with me." The middle-aged man put down his arm and looked at the old man beside him who was also in a military uniform. He said sincerely, almost pleading, "You've worked hard and made great contributions at the border for many years. Everyone has seen it. It's time for you to go back and enjoy your life. The environment here is hard, and it's not good for your health." The old man in the military uniform had white hair, but it was combed neatly. Even his body was straight. Unlike the middle-aged man beside him, he had a military rank, and it was not a low one. He was a lieutenant colonel. However, compared to the old man's age, this military rank was not very impressive. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the old man narrowed his somewhat turbid eyes. He shook his head with a smile and said in a hoarse voice, "Soldiers should die on the battlefield. Who would go back to enjoy life and wait for death?" "Dongxing, I appreciate your kindness, but forget about going back. Although I'm old, I can still carry a gun and contribute to the country for a few more years. After staying here for so long, even if I go back, I won't be used to it." The middle-aged man named Dongxing looked bitter. He opened his mouth and said worriedly, "Senior Li, your body is really not suitable to stay here." "I know my body." The old lieutenant colonel's tone was indifferent, but his expression was resolute. "Although I won't live for long, I can still carry a gun for a few more years. Dongxing, I've made up my mind. If you're just thinking about my body, then don't say anything." He paused and suddenly said with a self-mocking smile, "Of course, if you're here today for the treason of that little beast, Li Kuangtu, and you want me, Li Honghe, to go back to confess my crime, I'll go with you now. That beast committed treason. As his father, I'm guilty. It's the father's fault to raise him but not to teach him. I have nothing to say." "Senior Li." Yi Dongxing's expression changed. He raised his voice unhappily and said angrily, "Senior, what are you talking about? You're the hero of Zhongzhou State. Who dares to say that you're guilty? I'll be the first to shoot him." For hundreds of years, the military law of Zhongzhou State has never implicated others. He is him and you are you. They're two different things. If we didn't trust you, how could we have let you stay at the border for 20 years? The old man was expressionless. He just looked up at the star flag above his head, and his eyes were sad. Yi Dongxing sighed slightly, lowered his posture again, and said in a low voice, "Senior Li, although the case of Kuangtu's treason has been decided, it's the general trend. Many of the details are still confusing. From my personal standpoint, I don't believe that Kuangtu would commit treason. Although it's been 20 years, there's still a chance to reverse the verdict if we investigate it carefully. Senior Li, we need a stabilizing force like you to go back to Yuzhou and cheer us on. Li Honghe seemed to be disheartened. He shook his head and said indifferently, "Forget it. It's meaningless to dig up the things that have passed for so many years. Dongsheng, if you're not here to denounce me, then go back. This place is very suitable for me. I'm an old man who's about to die. If I go to the colorful world of Yuzhou, it'll be a suffering. Don't say any more." Yi Dongsheng opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he stopped on second thought. At this point, he really couldn't say anything. "Senior Li, I'll give you time to think about it. I'll see you again in a year. If you have any requirements, just tell me. I'll do my best to help you." Yi Dongsheng was silent for a while, and then said with a wry smile. Li Honghe just shook his head, indicating that he had no requirements. Yi Dongsheng let out a deep sigh. Without hesitation, he strode toward a helicopter parked in front of the watchtower. The helicopter's rotors roared, and the dust flew. When he was about to walk to the helicopter, Yi Dongsheng suddenly turned around and said loudly, "Senior Li, if we can prove Kuangtu's innocence and help you wash away your shame, would you like to go back to Yuzhou with me?" The dust under the rotors flew up, and Li Honghe's expression became a little vague. He narrowed his eyes, and his voice was not loud, but it clearly sounded in Yi Dongsheng's ears. "I'll wait for the good news." Yi Dongsheng nodded and went straight into the cabin. The helicopter began to take off, flying higher and higher. Inside the cabin, Yi Dongsheng sat in the seat, looking at the training ground that was getting smaller and smaller below, and looking at the old man who turned around and walked to the watchtower. He whispered to himself, "What are you insisting on?" At the same time, in the space on the top floor of the watchtower, when Li Honghe came in, a young man with his back to Li Honghe asked the same question. "What are you insisting on? You don't understand." Li Honghe looked at the young man standing in front of the window and responded with kind eyes. This was a young man who easily gave people a good impression at first glance. He was about 20 years old, thin, and had a face that could only be considered delicate. Perhaps because of years of malnutrition, it looked a little pale. His temperament was very gentle, and his eyes were clear. There was not the slightest sharpness or arrogance in him. He stood calmly at the window of the upper space of the watchtower, looking at the helicopter flying further and further away. His clear eyes were filled with undisguised desire and longing. Gentle as jade, quiet and far away. These words seemed to be the most appropriate to be used on him. "Why don't we go?" Hearing the old man's answer, the young man finally turned around and said calmly, "Grandpa, this should be the 4th time someone has come to ask you to come out of the mountain, right? We can leave, why don't we?" "We can't go." Li Honghe shook his head and said in a deep voice. "Waiting for a good price?" The young man raised his eyebrows slightly. "We can't help it." Li Honghe said with a wry smile, "Tianlun, you won't understand. There are some things that you will only understand when you leave here and go outside." "Outside?" Li Tianlun muttered to himself, and then said in a self-deprecating tone, "Outside." He had heard this word almost since he was a child, and he had heard it countless times. But in fact, his world was only the camp in front of him. More than a year ago, he did go out once, but he went to a more closed environment than here. Outside? What was outside? He looked around silently. The upper floor of the watchtower was similar to a room, but there were windows in all 4 directions for investigation. The room was built of wood, and the outer layer was covered with a layer of tarpaulin, which barely sheltered him from the wind and rain. The furnishings inside the room were also extremely simple. There was only a huge bookshelf full of books, which was very intimidating. On both sides of the bookshelf, there were 2 wooden beds for people to rest. Not far from the bookshelf, there were 2 desks with writing brushes and rice paper on them. That was where the grandfather and grandson usually practiced calligraphy. This was the world Li Tianlun grew up in. He didn't hate the current environment, but after going out once, he was more and more eager to go out and see the scenery outside. But over the years, his grandfather had always restricted him. Every time he asked, his grandfather would tell him that the time was not right. Li Tianlun didn't know when the right time was. But recently he had become more and more intolerable. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, picked up a piece of white cloth and dipped it in water. He walked to a plaque on the desk and wiped it silently. This plaque could be said to be the most valuable thing in the whole camp. It was a rosewood plaque nearly 2 meters long and 1 meter wide. It was a rare thing even in the top circle of Xianxia state, not to mention here. The 2 words on the plaque were natural and smooth, full of the demeanor of a big shot. The Li family. Li Tianlan looked at the 2 words silently and suddenly said, "The man who just came said that he could reverse the verdict for my father? He can reverse the verdict for my son, not for your father, and he won't reverse the verdict for your father." Li Honghe stood in front of the bookshelf, looking at the books on it, and said casually, "Is there a difference?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows again. His temperament looked very weak, but the movement of raising his eyebrows made him come alive and gave birth to a fierce momentum. "Of course there is," Li Honghe said calmly. "They don't know I have a grandson. If they know your existence..." "Huh?" Li Tianlan's expression was slightly stiff and he didn't speak. Li Honghe suddenly smiled and said to himself, "Yi Dongxing was brought up by me in those days. I know him better. He said he was worried about my health, and it was not an exaggeration. It is estimated that after he leaves this time, within 3 days, he will send 2 private doctors to me. He is considerate." "So?" Li Tianlan's heart beat instinctively. He didn't know what it meant, but it was very clear that if there were really private doctors coming, this camp would be the first time for outsiders to set foot in it for many years. "So, it's time for you to go out for a walk. It's time." Li Honghe looked at his grandson with a smile. His eyes were gentle, which was a kind of satisfaction and relief from the bottom of his heart. Li Tianlan's body trembled very obviously. He suddenly turned around and looked at Li Honghe. Li Honghe pulled out a book from the bookshelf and opened it. He took out a post and a card from it. He came to Li Tianlan, handed the card and the post to Li Tianlan, and said calmly, "You go today." Li Tianlan took them, his hands trembling violently. The post handed over by his grandfather almost instantly attracted all his attention. The post was all black, except for the silver star flag engraved on the cover. Under the flag, there were 4 small silver words. Sky Academy. There were 2 famous schools in Xianxia state that were little known but extremely famous in specific circles. One was called Deep Sea Academy, located in Yuzhou. The other was called Sky Academy, located in Huading. It was the top special warfare academy in Xianxia state. It was the gathering place of young elites in Xianxia state. The best special warfare team members, the most elite agents, and the most promising martial arts experts gathered together and competed together. The history of the 2 special warfare academies was not long. In just a few decades, they had brilliant generals and could be said to be extremely glorious. In a few decades, the 2 special warfare academies had produced hundreds of generals, countless agents and spies, and several special warfare giants. The outstanding graduates of each session of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy had considerable autonomy. On the premise of serving the country, they could choose to enter various special warfare departments in Xianxia state and would be focused on training. For anyone who had strength and ambition but no backing, an admission letter from the Deep Sea Academy or the Sky Academy was tantamount to a road to heaven. At this time, the black post in Li Tianlan's hand was the admission letter from the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan's heart was in turmoil. His excitement was not only because of the post in his hand, but also because of his father, who made him feel complicated, who also graduated from the Sky Academy and completed his studies with the best results. Did he betray Xianxia state back then? He must find out the truth when he went out this time. Li Honghe seemed to know what he was thinking and said calmly, "Don't do what you shouldn't do. Don't rush to investigate your father when you go out this time. It's useless. Your identity must be kept secret. Otherwise, if others know that you are my grandson, you will only die faster. You naturally need to reverse the verdict on your father, but now you are not qualified. At the very least, your achievements can't be weaker than your father's. Only in this way can you be qualified to investigate." Li Tianlan nodded silently and said nothing. "Do you know why I can still be here today?" Li Honghe suddenly asked. Before his grandson answered, he chuckled and said, "It's because I'm strong enough." "Grandpa, do you think it's a good thing to stay here?" Li Tianlan couldn't help asking, holding the post in his hand. Li Honghe took a deep look at him and said indifferently, "It's not a good thing, but there's something worse than this. You may not want to hear it." He shook his head and pointed to the business card in Li Tianlan's hand. "When you arrive in Huading, call this number. They will pick you up and arrange for you to go to school." Li Tianlan nodded and suddenly said, "Grandpa, what about you? Aren't you leaving?" "I'll wait for you to pick me up." Li Honghe smiled, took a step forward, tidied up his grandson's clothes, and said calmly, "Tianlan, some things are not as simple as you see. When you get out, you will naturally understand. I'll wait for you to become stronger. When you can reverse the verdict on your father and stop shaming the Li family, I'll leave this place." He took a step back, looked at Li Tianlan with a smile, and continued, "I can afford to wait for a few years." Li Tianlan clenched the post in his hand with a determined look. For the entire Xianxia state, his grandfather was a well-deserved hero. Therefore, he knew very well that his grandfather's past achievements could enable him to leave the forest with the admission notice of the Sky Academy and fight for the chance to reverse the verdict for his father and stop the Li family from being humiliated. However, his father's sins blocked all the possibilities for him to retreat. He could only advance on this trip, not retreat. If he retreated, he would die. "I'm leaving now." Li Tianlan put away the post and said without hesitation. Li Honghe nodded slightly and suddenly whispered, "In fact, you still have help, and the help is not small. The year you were born, I personally arranged a marriage for you. You don't need to know who it is. Whether this marriage is still valid or not depends on your performance. That old man's family is more realistic. If you behave like a wastrel, they definitely won't let their granddaughter marry you. If you perform well, someone will naturally look for you. At that time, whether this marriage is still valid or not, it will be up to you." Li Tianlan nodded silently, took a step back, knelt down to the old man, and kowtowed 3 times. Li Honghe stood where he was without any reaction. Li Tianlan got up silently and went straight down the watchtower. Outside the window, the setting sun was gone, and darkness enveloped the whole forest. In the windy but moonless night, Li Tianlan walked through the forest with no expression on his face and gradually went away. The old man had been standing by the window and watching Li Tianlan's back completely disappear. Then he slowly turned around and came to his desk. He picked up the brush and ground the ink, intending to practice calligraphy. Neither the grandfather nor the grandson's calligraphy was good, but practicing calligraphy could cultivate one's character. Therefore, the old man and the young man had been persistent for many years. But this time, Li Honghe held the brush for a long time and didn't write a word. It was not until the ink soaked the rice paper that he sighed, put down the brush, and came to Li Tianlan's desk. The ink on the desk had dried, and the black and white were particularly dazzling. Li Honghe stared at the rice paper, and his pupils suddenly contracted. Different from the small characters that Li Tianlan usually wrote, there was only one big character on the thin Xian paper. It was written in an ostentatious and wantonly manner. Between the lines, there was a kind of incisive fierceness. Li Honghe suddenly turned back. Li Tianlan's figure had already disappeared outside the window. Only the endless night filled the forest, as long as winter. Chapter 2. In Xianxia State, as a city whose importance was second only to the capital, Yuzhou, almost every corner of Huading was bustling with activity 24 hours a day. It was especially so at the station. With the steady rise of Xianxia State's status in the world, the development of Huading seemed to have reached a peak. More and more people began to come to this bustling big city to seek opportunities. People came and went in a hurry in the station. Dense crowds could be seen in every corner of the station. So many people. This was Li Tianlan's first impression of Huading. Dressed in coarse clothes and holding a paper bag in his hand, he followed the crowd out of the station. He felt uncomfortable from the inside out. Too many people and too fast. This was the only feeling he had. The city seemed to be exuding an invisible pressure at every moment. Everyone around him was walking in a hurry. This super fast pace was like a terrible infectious disease. It could easily infect everyone, so everyone's speed became faster and faster. It was as if they wanted to tire themselves to death. Li Tianlan's heart was as still as water. As a newcomer, even if he was assimilated by the pace of the city, it would not be so fast. Walking out of the station, Li Tianlan bought a bottle of 1 yuan mineral water and took a sip. Then he stood there calmly and waited. An hour ago, when he was still on the road, he pulled out the business card in the paper bag and dialed the number on it. He was a bumpkin who had just walked out of the primeval forest. The phone he called was borrowed from a kind-looking ant. The person who answered the phone was a woman who seemed to be very young. She had a cold voice and called herself Flaming Fire, a very strange name that was the opposite of the cold tone. They agreed to meet at the station exit in an hour. Calculating the time, it should be about time. Li Tianlan suddenly chuckled. Flaming Fire. To him, this name had a profound meaning. A young girl who happened to walk past Li Tianlan heard his laughter and subconsciously took a few steps away. She looked at him and frowned slightly, with undisguised disgust in her eyes. Li Tianlan was not ugly, but he was not handsome either. In addition, he was dressed in coarse clothes, holding a bottle of mineral water in his hand and clutching a paper bag that obviously had no money. He looked like a bumpkin who had never seen the world. If such a person giggled at someone for no reason, that person would not be in a good mood. The average-looking young girl glared at Li Tianlan and turned to leave. Li Tianlan took a sip of water and laughed it off. For this city, he, who had spent most of his life in the primeval forest, was indeed a bumpkin, but he didn't think there was anything to feel inferior about. Having a grandfather who had experienced ups and downs in life made his 19 years of life full of ups and downs. From the bottom of his heart, Li Tianlan never felt that he was worse than his peers. Now that he had a perfect starting point, he firmly believed that as long as he was given time, he would have what others had sooner or later. And it wouldn't take long. A brand new black Audi slowly drove into the station and finally came to the exit, stopping in front of Li Tianlan. The door of the driver's seat opened, and a woman with a delicate face but a cold face got out of the car. She went straight to Li Tianlan and said with no expression, "Mr. Li? I'm Flaming Fire." "I'm Li Tianlan." Li Tianlan smiled and looked at the woman in front of him with a serious look. She was about 30 years old, less than 1.7 meters tall, and had a delicate appearance, which could even be said to be elegant. She wore no makeup, and her whole person gave people a feeling of a straightforward and efficient person. The only pity was that her expression was too cold, which made people feel a chill in their hearts. If her expression could be more relaxed, it would not be difficult for her to attract the attention of the opposite sex when she walked on the street. The pedestrians nearby also began to look this way, intentionally or unintentionally. Although Flaming Fire's temperament was a little scary, she was still a beauty. Now that a beautiful woman and a famous car suddenly appeared in front of a silly bumpkin, the scene was very strange, and the passers-by were happy to pay more attention to them. Flaming Fire turned a blind eye to the strange eyes around her. After confirming Li Tianlan's identity, she nodded and said, "The boss has come to pick you up in person. Get in the car." As soon as her voice fell, a soft sound came from behind. In Li Tianlan's sight, the rear door of the Audi slowly opened, and a slender and soft calf stepped on a pair of black stilettos and gently knocked on the ground. A tall young figure got out of the back of the Audi and looked at Li Tianlan. At this moment, Li Tianlan only saw a pair of eyes as bright as the Milky Way. Flaming Fire turned around and looked at the boss who suddenly appeared from the car, looking surprised. The woman who took the initiative to get out of the car took 2 steps forward and stepped on the ground with her stilettos. The clear sound seemed to knock on the hearts of all men. Li Tianlan's face was dull. The woman's eyes were complicated. "I'm Wei Bai." After a short silence, she took the initiative to stretch out her hand and said, "Qin Wei Bai." Flaming Fire's eyes became more and more surprised. In the whole of Huading, people who knew her mysterious boss also knew that the boss never shook hands with anyone of the opposite sex. Why was this bumpkin in front of her so preferential treatment? Did the sun rise from the west? "Oh, I'm Li Tianlan." Li Tianlan suddenly came to his senses and grabbed Qin Weibai's small hand. It was soft and warm, like the rare warm jade in the world. Li Tianlan's heart was in a mess, and for a moment he even blushed. In his 19 years of life, his most proud state of mind was his state of mind. Even if his grandfather, Li Honghe, was harsh to evaluate him, he deserved the evaluation of a heart as still as water, perfect and flawless. But at this moment, his state of mind, which was as still as water, suddenly exploded, and the waves were monstrous. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and his eyes finally fell on Qin Weibai's face again. The woman in front of him could be said to be the most perfect woman he had ever seen in his life. Her figure was slender and tall. She was at least 1.75 meters tall when she was barefoot. When she wore high heels, it was enough to make most men feel ashamed of their inferiority. Her face could be said to be devastatingly beautiful. The lines were sharp and exquisite, especially her pair of bright eyes. They were calm and deep, and could make any man willingly sink into them. She stood quietly in front of Li Tianlan, letting Li Tianlan hold her little hand, looking cold and indifferent. Like the snow in the sky. Like the moon in the clouds. She was ethereal, like a fairy who would fly away with the wind in the next second. Aloof from the world and peerless beauty, this was probably the description of such a woman. Li Tianlan subconsciously tightened his grip. Noticing this detail, Flaming Fire's eyes suddenly turned cold, and a trace of killing intent emerged from her whole body. How sharp was Li Tianlan's perception? Before Flaming Fire could speak, he had already realized his gaffe. He quickly let go of her hand and said, "Sorry, Boss Qin. It doesn't matter. If you want, you can directly call me Weibai in the future." Qin Weibai calmly withdrew her hand and said in a soft tone, "Boss Qin, this name is not good. It's not Weibai, it's simply white with a hint of red, unparalleled charm." Li Tianlan forced himself to calm down and said with a smile. Flaming Fire turned her head to one side and resisted the urge to scold him. In her heart, she was already extremely dissatisfied with this bumpkin who dared to flirt with her boss. Qin Weibai's eyes were in a trance. At this moment, even Li Tianlan could clearly feel that the perfect woman in front of him seemed to have drifted somewhere. But she quickly recovered and said with a chuckle, "Let's talk in the car." Li Tianlan nodded and followed Qin Weibai into the back seat of the Audi under the envious and jealous eyes of the surrounding pedestrians. Flaming Fire, whose face was getting colder, started the car. The car quickly left the station and entered the wide and neat streets of Huding. In the back of the car, the first thing Qin Weibai did after she got into the car was to pick up a heavy notebook. The blue cover looked old. She gently opened it and flipped through it. The yellowed paper inside was densely covered with handwriting. Qin Weibai closed the notebook and held it in her hand. In a soft voice, she said, "Shall we go eat something?" Li Tianlan nodded directly. When he came out of Li's village, he only brought a few hundred yuan. After buying the ticket, he was left with a pathetic 350 yuan in his pocket. A boxed lunch in the car cost 50 yuan. Li Tianlan had endured it until now because he was really hungry. "Let's go to use for private home cuisine and then prepare some daily necessities for you. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the Sky Academy to arrange your enrollment. Tianlan, you can call me if you have any problems in Huding. I'll try my best to solve them. My mobile phone is on 24 hours a day. You can call me at any time." Qin Weibai stroked the notebook in her hand and looked at Li Tianlan beside her. Her tone was very serious. Smelling the faint fragrance of the beauty beside him and looking at the dreamy face in his sight, Li Tianlan's heart beat faster again. He forced himself to look away and nodded. "I understand. Thank you, Boss Qin." Qin Weibai frowned. Obviously, she was not very satisfied with the title Boss Qin, but she did not say much. Li Tianlan also fell silent and looked at Huding outside the car window in a trance. Row upon row of high-rise buildings, roaring cars coming and going, well-dressed pedestrians strolling on the street, old people holding children's hands, laughing and talking. There was also the warm sunshine that was rarely felt at the border. Scenes of prosperity kept retreating as the car moved forward. Li Tianlan's eyes were in a trance. His pale face was complicated and sad. He thought of the father he had never seen again. 20 years ago, his father was one of the top special warfare personnel in Xianxia State. But at the peak of his career, he died in the most humiliating way on the border between Xianxia State and Annan State. The charge was treason. The evidence was conclusive. If the most influential case of treason in recent years had not happened, his life from childhood to adulthood would probably be different. He would be the same as these people outside the car window, or even better. He did not think that the high-rise buildings and cars coming and going outside the window were so attractive. But for the first time, this bumpkin who lived in the lush forest all year round felt that a place with sunshine and laughter was a place where people lived. The scenes of prosperity in front of him were beautiful scenes that he had never dreamed of. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of the camp at the border. He thought of those veterans who followed his grandfather to exile him at the border for many years after his father's treason. He thought of Yi Dongxing's words. Yi Dongxing said that he could try to reverse the verdict for his father and prove his innocence. If father was really innocent back then who was the one who caused the treason case? Who was it that killed his father? Who are they? What do they want? What is all this for? Li Tianlan did not know who they were. But he was sure that if they really existed, they definitely had the strength to stand at the peak of this city and even the whole Xianxia state. The scene outside the window was getting more and more prosperous. Li Tianlan tightly pursed his lips. He was under pressure, but more than that, he was filled with endless fighting spirit. What are you thinking about? Qin Weibai, who had been looking at Li Tianlan, suddenly asked. They shouldn't live in that kind of place. They really shouldn't. Li Tianlan stared at everything outside the window and muttered to himself. A hint of a smile appeared on Qin Weibai's cold and delicate face. She seemed to have understood what Li Tianlan meant, but at the same time, she seemed to have not. Some people say that Huading is a city that has been desolate for 1,000 years and a glorious era. This is a miraculous city that rose from zero. Tianlan, what do you think of this comment? Desolate for 1,000 years and a glorious era, Li Tianlan's eyes were still looking out of the window. He smiled and said, How can I do that? Beside him, Qin Weibai sighed softly and subconsciously opened the old heavy notebook in her hand. Hundreds of words appeared vividly on the yellowed paper, like someone's diary. To be fair, the handwriting on the paper was not beautiful, but it had a kind of piercing sharpness. Every stroke penetrated the back of the paper, and every word was as sharp as a sword. Qin Weibai's eyes stopped on the last sentence of the diary, and she was lost in thought. Everything under the sun is an illusion. I come from the darkness with eternal majesty. Chapter 3. The so-called private home cuisine referred to a small catering business that was opened in a residence or office building without a license, no waiters, and no fixed menu. It was a business with a very low threshold. As long as the chef had the skills, it didn't take much effort to do it. It was just a matter of taste. Huading, with a population of tens of millions, could easily have tens of thousands of private home cuisine restaurants, but there were few that could really be remembered by diners. After all, the entry threshold was low, and the quality was inevitably uneven. Among the countless private home cuisine restaurants, very few could make a name for themselves, and Yu's private home cuisine was one of them. Yu's private home cuisine in Huading was so famous that even Li Tianlan, a bumpkin, had heard of it. Most of what he had seen and heard came from his grandfather, Li Honghe. The old man, who was now down and out, also had a glorious life decades ago. At the border, the old man had mentioned Huading's Yu's top-grade xiaodiao and braised pork several times. Yu's xiaodiao, in particular, had a limited production. A considerable part of it was given to the top tycoons in Xianxia State's Hidden Dragon Sea every year. The rest was scarce, even rarer than a 50-year-old Mao. Decades ago, Li Honghe, as one of the strongest men in Xianxia State, lived inside the Red Wall. He could get more than 10 jars of Yu's xiaodiao every year. The old man once praised this wine as an immortal wine. Later, he went to the border because of his son's accident. Not to mention the top-grade xiaodiao, he rarely had the chance to drink erguotu, which cost a few yuan. In Li's village, the old man, who was addicted to alcohol, could drink a bottle of erguoto for a week or even a month. He took a sip every time and praised erguoto as an immortal wine. The old man enjoyed himself, but Li Tianlan felt sad. Naturally, he was deeply impressed by Yu's private home cuisine that the old man mentioned several times. The black Audi drove around in the bustling downtown area of Huading and finally stopped in front of a deep alley. Yu's private home cuisine is in front of us. The car can't get in. We have to walk another 100 meters, Qin Weibai said softly with a notebook in her hand. She seemed to be in a good mood. Her slender legs, which were so long that it made one's mouth dry, were crossed. There was a smile on her dreamy, exquisite face. It was light and shallow, but it added a sense of elegance and serenity to her whole person. Good wine needs no bush. It takes courage to open a restaurant in such a place, even if it's a private restaurant. Li Tianlan sighed with emotion as he looked at the scene in front of him. They had long since left the center of Huading. This place was not a godforsaken place, but no one would deny that it was desolate. There were no high-end residential areas or large companies nearby. Some ordinary people obviously couldn't afford the private home cuisine of Yu's that easily cost tens of thousands of yuan. It was almost impossible to open a private home cuisine restaurant in such a place and have a good business. This place doesn't make money by sales. Yu's private home cuisine has a history of more than 100 years in Huading. Old Master Yu of this generation was the best chef in the Red Wall a few years ago. In the past, his status was no less than that of the royal chefs in the imperial palace. It is said that many high-level officials in Zhongzhou state have a special liking for his cooking. After coming out of the Red Wall, the old man opened Yu's private home cuisine in Huading and soon became famous. However, the old man only cooks 3 tables a day and needs to make reservations 3 days in advance. He never makes an exception, so there is no need for too many people to come here. 3 groups of customers a day are enough. Qin Weibai got out of the car with the notebook in her hand and walked in front to lead the way. An old man with a character. Li Tianlan replied casually, but his eyes involuntarily looked at Qin Weibai's back. From the back, Qin Weibai was still a beautiful sight that would never fade. Her white and tender neck, slender waist, perky buttocks that didn't look fat, and slender and straight legs would make people subconsciously fantasize. A sentence came to Li Tianlan's mind subconsciously. Every move could be a poem. Every frown and smile could be a painting. This kind of perfect charm was simply natural. It was not an exaggeration to say that it could even ruin a country and bring disaster to the people. She really has a character. Some time ago, a senior official of Huading accompanied a leader from the capital to have a meal. Because he didn't make a reservation in advance, he was directly turned away. Even his official identity didn't work. In the end, the 2 senior officials could only swallow it and didn't even dare to say a harsh word. Qin Weibai said as she walked. So fierce. Li Tianlan was a little surprised. The feudal autocratic culture of Zhongzhou state for more than 2,000 years had made the ideology of the official standard go deep into all levels of Zhongzhou state's society. It could even be said that it was part of Zhongzhou state's culture. Everyone knew that this kind of dregs of the official was wrong, but it was difficult to change anything. How could an old man who ran a private home cuisine restaurant have the courage to turn away 2 senior officials? This was not something that could be explained by principles at all. Li Tianlan was thoughtful. The oppressive life in the primeval forest from childhood to adulthood didn't make him crazy. Instead, it made his mind extremely active and sharp. He could think of all aspects of anything, no matter how big or small, useful or useless. When he was very young, Li Honghe had taught him the most basic truth. It was always right to think more about anything at any time. Qin Weibai's words seemed very ordinary, but after careful consideration, Li Tianlan always felt that there seemed to be some meaning in her words, with an unfathomable meaning. The old man used to be a chef in the Red Wall for many years and knew many senior officials. One of the big shots especially appreciated the old man's cooking. This kind of relationship may not help the old man do anything big, but it will never let the old man fall to the point of being bullied. Qin Weibai's tone became more and more light. A chef? Even if he is a chef in the Red Wall, he shouldn't. Li Tianlan said as if talking to himself. Qin Weibai smiled slightly and didn't speak. As they chatted, they had walked to the door of Yu's private home cuisine in the depths of the alley. Yu's private home cuisine sounded very arrogant, but it was very low-key on the outside. It was just a small courtyard with 2 wooden doors that looked particularly old. There was only a plaque hanging above the door, and the 2 words Yu's on the plaque seemed to have become blurred after years of wind and rain. Li Tianlan glanced at the plaque unconsciously, and his footsteps that were about to enter the door suddenly stopped. His pupils suddenly shrank, and his eyes stared at the 2 words Yu's on the plaque. How similar the 2 words Yu's in front of him were to the 2 words Li's on the big red sandalwood plaque in the watchtower of the border camp. Whether it was the charm or the characters, they were exactly the same. It was completely the work of the same person. It was his grandfather, Li Honghe, who wrote the 2 words Li's on the red sandalwood plaque and put it in the watchtower. The plaque of Yu's in front of him. Li Tianlan glanced at Qin Weibai beside him. She brought him here for more than just a meal. Qin Weibai still stood there calmly, but the look in her eyes was a little playful. Shall we go in? Okay. Chapter 4. The interior of Yu's small courtyard was not large, but it was very elegant. There were flower beds on all sides, leaving only a stone path for walking. Several stone tables were placed in a triangular shape in the courtyard. Sitting in front of the tables, one would feel as if they were in a sea of flowers, and the fragrance of the flowers was pleasant. When Li Tianlan entered the small courtyard, an old man, who looked about 70 or 80 years old, was lying drowsily on a wooden recliner in the courtyard, basking in the sun. The old man was thin and short, only a little more than 1.6 meters tall. His hair was gray, and his face was wrinkled. He was lying comfortably on the recliner, which was much larger than his body, exuding an air of decadence from head to toe. Li Tianlan looked calm. Sensing that someone came in, the old man opened his half-closed eyes and glanced at Qin Weibai. He chuckled and said, "Are you here to freeload again? Girl, you can't finish all the delicacies all day long. It's hard for you to take a fancy to my shallow cooking." "Old man, your cooking is not shallow. Otherwise, how could so many big shots in Zhongzhou State be reluctant to leave you? Anyway, you are half a teacher to me. I'm here to go home. I'm going home for a meal. What's wrong with you?" Qin Weibai sat at the stone table closest to the old man and said with a smile, "Forget it. Go home. This is not your home, and I can't afford to raise you. The last time you came here for a meal, my granddaughter gave you a nickname. Do you know what it is? Sister Good for Nothing. You eat more than what my granddaughter and I eat in 3 days. These days, no one has extra food at home. If you don't come here often, my granddaughter and I will thank you for your great kindness." The old man lay on the recliner and rolled his eyes. He and Qin Weibai obviously had a deep relationship, so he spoke without any scruples. It could be said that he was unscrupulous. "I know Qin Yan. She can't give me such an ugly nickname. It's mostly your doing. It's really strange that a restaurant owner is afraid of a customer with a big appetite. Old man, you are also a weirdo." Qin Weibai smiled gently. "You're also a customer? You never pay for a meal." The old man's face was filled with grief and indignation. He wanted to cry but had no tears. She pointed at Li Tianlan, who was sitting beside her, and said, "Let me introduce you to a friend. Li Tianlan, he just came to Huading from the southwest border. We are not strangers. Maybe he will come here every few days to freeload a meal." At this moment, not only Li Tianlan, but also Flaming Fire, who was standing behind them, could clearly hear the vague expectation in the boss's tone. The old man finally set his eyes on Li Tianlan, who looked calm. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. The atmosphere instantly became oppressive. He slowly sat up from the recliner and looked at Li Tianlan with burning eyes. "Senior Yu, I'm Li Tianlan." Li Tianlan took the initiative to say, "Is His Highness Honghe all right?" Old man Yu suddenly asked with a complicated tone. "You resemble His Highness when he was young by 30%, but 90% in spirit." I guessed your identity the moment I saw you. His Highness was a term of respect for people whose strength had reached a certain height. In the hundreds of years since the founding of Xianxia state, there were only a few people who could be called His Highness. Grandpa is all right. Li Tianlan bowed slightly and answered politely. Your grandpa, the old man sighed softly, looking nostalgic. He seemed to want to say something, but he just opened his mouth and said, I'm Yu Donglai, one of His Highness's guards. You can come here for dinner in the future and chat with me. We will have time to talk about what happened between me and His Highness in the past. Li Tianlan nodded, his expression still unchanged. You are neither humble nor arrogant. No matter what your temperament is, at least you have the appearance. Oi, what realm are you in now? Yu Donglai took a deep look at Li Tianlan and suddenly asked. Li Tianlan looked calm and said calmly, I haven't entered the 4 realms of martial arts, so it's not a realm. He knew that this would probably be a very disappointing answer to the old man, but he didn't want to hide anything. His martial arts placed great emphasis on the state of mind, stressing that his heart was as steady as a rock despite the changes of the outside world. Such a martial arts indirectly shaped his character. He was neither arrogant nor rash, and he was not affected by honor or disgrace. He didn't seem to talk much, but he didn't miss a word that he should say, and he didn't say a word that he shouldn't. Facing Yu Donglai, Li Tianlan knew what kind of attitude he should use, and he also knew the expectations of his grandfather's old subordinate. In this case, being frank was the best way. His achievement of not entering the 4 realms of martial arts at the age of 19 didn't seem very impressive, but it was better than being vague and hiding. You haven't entered the 4 realms of martial arts? Yu Donglai's wrinkled face was full of disbelief. Oi, how old are you? I'll be 20 in 3 months. Li Tianlan still told the truth. Yu Donglai looked like he was deeply shocked. He looked at Li Tianlan in a daze and couldn't say anything for a while. The 4 realms of martial arts were the universal standard for dividing strength in the world, and they also represented the most central force in the world. The chi-controlling realm, the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, and the thunder-shocking realm. These were not realms cultivated by internal force, but the limit that ordinary people could reach with muscles and bones. Above the 4 realms of martial arts, there was the invincible realm. That mysterious realm was beyond the understanding of most people. In the world, any expert in the invincible realm was an unattainable myth and legend. Ordinary geniuses could almost enter the chi-controlling realm, the most basic of the 4 realms of martial arts, before the age of 18. Below the martial arts, everyone was a non-entity. Li Tianlan was about to be 20 years old, but he still hadn't entered the Tao, which was indeed a little embarrassing. Forget it, let's not talk about this. I'll cook in person today as a welcome dinner for you. Bye, come and help me. A strong disappointment flashed in Yu Donglai's eyes, and then he returned to normal. He said in a calm tone. Qin Weibai nodded at Li Tianlan, and then followed Yu Donglai into the kitchen one after another. The moment the kitchen door was closed, Yu Donglai, who was walking in front, suddenly turned around and stared at Qin Weibai, who still looked calm. He said in a serious tone, How did you get involved with His Highness? I have nothing to do with Li Honghe. I just have something to do with Tianlan. Qin Weibai's tone was calm, but Yu Donglai still noticed that when she said the name of Li Honghe, there was a strong dissatisfaction in her tone. Yu Donglai was a little surprised, but he still said disapprovingly, Isn't it the same? Do you dare to say that you didn't help Li Tianlan for the strength of His Highness in the invincible realm? Of course not. Qin Weibai said calmly, Li Honghe's strength of the invincible realm happened 20 years ago. I'm not even sure if he is still in that realm now. How could I help his grandson for this? I just want to help Tianlan, and it has nothing to do with others. Tianlan, Yu Donglai murmured to himself. He finally sensed the unusual tenderness in Qin Weibai's tone. He widened his eyes and stared at Qin Weibai. He said in disbelief, Don't tell me that you've fallen for that lad? Qin Weibai didn't admit it or deny it. She took 2 steps forward, picked up an eggplant, washed it, and put it on the panel. How is it possible? That guy is not bad, but he hasn't entered the 4 realms of martial arts at the age of 20. His aptitude is quite ordinary. Moreover, he is 4 or 5 years younger than you, and he looks ordinary. He's just a greenhorn. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't even know of his existence. It's already an accident that you can get in touch with His Highness Honghe. Now you actually... It doesn't make sense at all. Yu Donglai looked as if he had seen a ghost. You don't understand. Qin Weibai said calmly with her back to Yu Donglai. Yes, I don't understand, but I understand the current situation. No one knows Li Tianlan's identity for the time being, right? But how long can this secret be hidden? A year? Or 2 years? Once his identity is exposed, how many people want to kill him, whether because of the treason case or because of his identity as Li Honghe's grandson? Too many to count. How long can he, an ordinary person who can't even enter the martial arts, live? You're asking for a big trouble for yourself, Yu Donglai said with a sneer on his face. Qin Weibai paused and said calmly, So, old man, you're going to turn a blind eye to Tianlan coming to Huading? Yu Donglai was silent. After a long time, he said calmly, His Highness has done me a great favor. I can't stay out of Li Tianlan's affairs, but there's not much I can do. His aptitude is ordinary. If he's willing to be an ordinary person, I should be able to keep him alive with the help of the balance of various forces. This is a situation that everyone can accept. Of course, the premise is that you don't get involved with him. What Yu Donglai said was from the bottom of his heart. Qin Weibai's power was not great at the moment, but she had terrifying potential. Li Tianlan's identity was too sensitive. Once his sensitive identity was combined with Qin Weibai's potential, he was afraid that many people would not hesitate to kill the two of them. When Yu Donglai arrived, he would not even be able to stop them. The Li family had withdrawn from the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state for 20 years. Both the enemies and those who had benefited from it were unwilling to see the Li family rise again. Both can accept it? Qin Weibai said coldly, At least I can't, and neither can Tianlan. Old man, what do you think Tianlan came to Huading for? If he just wanted to be an ordinary person, wouldn't it be better for him to stay at the border? Although it's risky there, it's much better than his situation here after his identity is exposed. Yu Donglai was slightly stunned. Before he could ask, Qin Weibai continued, he didn't come to Huading to be an ordinary person and enjoy life. He's a freshman of the Sky Academy. Yu Donglai's expression suddenly changed. He said angrily, Sky Academy? Is that guy crazy? What kind of place is the Sky Academy? It's a 30% mortality rate. With his qualifications, it's impossible for him to make a name for himself. Is he going there to be cannon fodder for others? No, he's going to the Sky Academy. Does he want to investigate his father's treason? Damn it, he's an idiot. What he should do is to stay away from the circle of the special warfare system, instead of taking the initiative to get close to it. Otherwise, once his identity is exposed, more than half of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state will be his enemy, and they'll fight to the death. This guy is courting death, Yu Donglai said with certainty. So I plan to go to Billy State in the next few days. If everything goes well, at least Tianlan will have one more life-saving card. At the very least, it will give him more time to grow. Qin Weibai smiled, and her tone became more and more ethereal. Yu Donglai's palm shook, and a piece of streaky pork he had just taken out fell to the ground. You're crazy. You'd better not touch things that don't belong to you. Don't you understand such a simple truth? The old man shouted in exasperation. What I like is mine. That's my truth. Qin Weibai's tone was calm, and her momentum suddenly changed, becoming cold and domineering. Yu Donglai felt powerless. Once in Zhongzhou state, an eccentric Taoist who was regarded as a half-immortal by countless bigwigs had commented on all the heroes in Zhongzhou state one by one. When that eccentric Taoist commented on the patriarch of a top wealthy family in Zhongzhou state, he directly used the phrase, saint inside and king outside, to summarize. This comment was still widely spread, and some people still remembered it clearly. With everything Qin Weibai had now, she was naturally not in the eccentric Taoist's eyes, nor was she qualified to be on the list of people to be commented on. But few people knew that when that eccentric Taoist traveled in Huading, he once met Qin Weibai, who was just over 20 years old at that time, and also gave her a forward comment. It was completely opposite to the comment of that patriarch of a top wealthy family. King inside and saint outside. This young woman, who was now known and remembered by more and more people in Huading, never had any room for change or compromise when she decided on something. Yu Donglai could not stop her, and no one could. If you can really come back alive, Li Tianlan will indeed have one more life-saving trump card in the Sky Academy. But is it all worth it? The old man picked up another piece of streaky pork and asked in a complicated tone. Before Qin Weibai could continue, he said again, "I have no choice. He is the grandson of His Highness. In any case, I will protect him even if I have to sacrifice my old bones. But you don't have to do this at all. I'm really curious about how you know that guy. It's totally inexplicable." Qin Weibai, who was chopping vegetables with a kitchen knife, looked at him with gentle eyes and murmured softly, "A long, long time ago, before he knew it, I knew him." She took a deep breath and said slowly, "Old man, I know you have a close relationship with the headmaster of the Sky Academy, and it's hard for me to speak to them. This time, when Tianlan enters the Sky Academy, I hope you can help him when necessary." "We'll see about this later," Yu Donglai said impatiently and then said, "But I still can't figure it out. There's really nothing special about this guy. If he wasn't the grandson of His Highness, I wouldn't even take a look at him. I think that Wang Xiaoyao is more suitable for you. That man has been pursuing you for several years. It can be said that he's infatuated. He doesn't deserve me." Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows. In an instant she was in high spirits, showing her peerless elegance. "In the next hundreds of years, if the world can only remember one person, then it must be my man. Wang Xiaoyao can't do this. He doesn't deserve me. Then can Li Tianlan outside do this? If I want to comment on this guy, I can only say one word: sloppy and ordinary." Yu Donglai said grumpily. "What a coincidence. I also have a word for Tianlan." Qin Weibai said softly. "What word?" Yu Donglai asked with interest. Qin Weibai's tone was loud and clear. Chapter 5. The site of the Sky Academy was located between Wudong New District and Chongguang Island in Huading. A few decades ago, when the international situation was still stable and peaceful, before the Sky Academy was established, there was an official name for the place: Changqing Island. It was one of the places with the best natural environment and the most developed tourism industry in Huading. However, all of this became history with the continuous outbreak of secret wars in Zhongzhou State. Zhongzhou State, which was once mired in the quagmire of war, was particularly sensitive to the turbulent international situation. In the first few years of the continuous outbreak of secret wars in various countries, the higher-ups directly decided to establish the Sky Academy after careful consideration and set the site on Changqing Island. 120,000 residents on the island were quickly relocated within a month, and the compensation was paid immediately. The entire 160 square kilometers of Changqing Island became the first special warfare academy in Zhongzhou State almost immediately, or a heavily guarded and powerful military base. The position of the Sky Academy on the map of Zhongzhou State was very delicate. The higher-ups naturally valued not only the political status of Huading but also the strategic significance of Huading and Changqing Island. By attacking, they could directly attack East Island State and Gaoshan State in the west, deter Treasure Island, which had been trying to establish itself in the south, and also directly enter the South Sea through the most convenient route to fight. By defending, several important provinces and cities in Huading, Wuyue, Xianxia, Minnan, Beihu, Jiangnan, and Zhongyuan were also under the protection of the Sky Academy. The Sky Academy could be said to be a sharp sword inserted in the southeast of Zhongzhou State. It could attack and defend, and it was almost innately invincible. Li Tianlan had longed for the Sky Academy for a long time, and he had imagined how magnificent this famous special warfare academy was countless times in his heart. However, after landing on this island and seeing the tip of the iceberg of the Sky Academy with his own eyes, he couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. the Sky Academy did not have a gate. Every inch of the entire Chongqing Island could be said to be the territory of the Sky Academy. On such a land that was enough for more than 100,000 people to live happily, there were now less than 3,000 teachers and students in the Sky Academy. It could be seen how much importance the higher-ups of Zhongzhou State attached to this special warfare academy, whose history was 5 years earlier than that of the Deep Sea Academy. The teaching buildings and dormitories on the island only occupied a small area. Most of the places were built into various training grounds for different purposes. In addition, there were 2 military airports and a military port on the island, which had everything from fighter jets and warships to speedboats and parachutes. From time to time, fighter jets and helicopters took off and landed in the air. On the sea in the distance, the vague outline of the warships became clearer and clearer. In the sea in the distance, a dozen figures fell rapidly from the sky. Parachutes opened in the rapid descent and suddenly slowed down. More than a dozen students who jumped slowly landed in the depths of the island. The Sky Academy's curriculum is very rich and complicated, but also very simple. The Academy's curriculum is Academy's courses. Secondly, they should be proficient in shooting, disguise, tracking, lurking, assassination, protection, and other skills. These skills almost cover more than 90% of the courses in the Sky Academy, and the other 10% is the core, which is the improvement of combat effectiveness. Qin Weibai stood beside Li Tianlan and whispered, "This is a place where you can control and even change your own fate. It's amazing but also cruel. Every student here has the possibility of facing the threat of death during their training. The country has set the casualty rate at 30%. How shocking is this figure? Those who are not part of the game will never understand. There is always a price to pay if you want to change your fate," Li Tianlan said softly. His carefully trimmed hair, white shirt, black trousers, and leather shoes made him look completely different from the bumpkin who had just entered Huading yesterday. It was true that clothes make the man. Li Tianlan, who had taken off his coarse clothes, still looked clean and gentle, but it made his seemingly thin body look tall and tough. Standing on the land that belonged to the Sky Academy, his eyes only swept over the fighter jets in the air and the warships in the distance. Most of the time, his eyes were fixed on a boulder in front of him. This boulder was the first big guy he saw after landing on the island. The boulder was 100 meters high and was a standard rectangle. It stood on the ground like a monument. In the Sky Academy, which had no gate, it was almost the facade of the Sky Academy. Countless names were engraved on the stone tablet, and in the middle of the countless names, 6 large blood-red characters appeared heroic and mournful under the illumination of the sunlight. A place of heroes. In the 9th month after the establishment of the Sky Academy, an important figure in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State committed treason and fled to Heng State with a lot of confidential information. 60 students of the Sky Academy sneaked into Heng State to hunt him down. After a week, they successfully killed the escaped Major General and destroyed all the information. In the process of evacuating Heng State, the 60 students fought with the special warfare elites of Heng State and killed nearly 300 enemies. Only 5 of the 60 students finally returned to Zhongzhou State alive. Among the 5 survivors, 2 were seriously injured and retired. The other 3 were all promoted to Major General after the battle. In the 5th year after the establishment of the Sky Academy, 600 students graduated from the first class. Colonel Gao Changfeng graduated first with excellent results and personally founded the Special Warfare Force Storm. In the 3rd month after the establishment of the Storm, a mysterious foreign armed force sneaked into the border of Zhongzhou State. All 102 elites of the Storm went to war and wiped out nearly 500 people of the foreign armed force. Then the Storm chased them all the way into the enemy's rear and rushed into the headquarters of the foreign armed force codenamed Giant Rock. In one night, they wiped out more than 1,300 people of Giant Rock. Then the Storm was besieged by the local special warfare elites. All 102 people were wiped out. In the 8th year after the establishment of the Sky Academy, 5 excellent agents who went out of the Sky Academy and lurked in Annan State took a risk in desperation because of a very important military information. They successfully assassinated Yuan Jingsheng, the core figure of the special warfare system of Annan State. Then their identities were exposed and they were trapped in Annan State. The Sky Academy dispatched 4 batches of elites, totaling 260 people, to rescue them in 3 days. In the end, only 3 people returned to Xianxia State with the information. The other soldiers were all buried in foreign lands, and some even had no bones left. At that time, the president of Xianxia State came to the Sky Academy in person, set up this stone tablet, and mentioned these 6 words in person. From then on, the headmaster of the Sky Academy would personally engrave the names of every soldier and agent who graduated from the Sky Academy after their sacrifice. Boy, do you see? The stone tablet in front of you is engraved with the names of almost all the victims of the Sky Academy. For decades, only one student who graduated from the Sky Academy did not have his name appear on it after his death. Instead, he became a disgrace to the Sky Academy. Boy, do you know who he is? Yu Donglai, who came here with Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan, suddenly asked. The old man was accompanied by a girl who was about the same age as Li Tianlan or even younger. She wore a pure white dress and had bright eyes and white teeth. She looked gentle and quiet, like a pure and flawless white lotus. She felt the sharpness of Yu Donglai's tone. She stretched out her small hand and gently pulled Yu Donglai's cuff. Yu Donglai was unmoved and just looked at Li Tianlan calmly. Qin Weibai's expression changed, but she did not speak in the end. I know. Li Tianlan said in a calm tone and said nothing more. His father was a student of the Sky Academy, and he graduated with the most perfect results. The man who should have become one of the giants in the dark world after leaving the Sky Academy and brought great glory to the Sky Academy had accidentally become the only traitor since the establishment of the Sky Academy. This was a disgrace to Xianxia State and also the deepest hidden scar of the Sky Academy. If there was only one name missing on this stone tablet, which was engraved with the words, Land of Heroes, Li Tianlan did not need to think to know who the missing name was. If it weren't for the heavy loss caused to Xianxia State by the treason case full of inside stories, the Sky Academy would definitely be more glorious today. At least, it wouldn't be overshadowed by the Deep Sea Academy, and it would be more worthy of the name, the place where heroes come from. Yu Donglai glanced at Li Tianlan and said in a melancholy tone. He paused for a moment before continuing, then some people wouldn't be so arrogant. Li Tianlan suddenly turned around. His eyes, which had been calm as water, suddenly became as sharp as a sword. He looked directly at Yu Donglai and asked, Senior Yu, who are you talking about? Yu Donglai was expressionless. He just waved his hand and said to the girl beside him, Qing, go and register with your brother Li. I'm going to visit your grandpa Zhuang with your sister Little Bai. We'll meet you in the dormitory area later. Yu Qingyan, who was dressed in a white dress, answered obediently. She looked at Li Tianlan and called him Brother Li. Like Li Tianlan, she was also a student of the Sky Academy this year. She was pure and kind, but had a good aptitude for martial arts. After having lunch at Yu's private restaurant yesterday and leaving, Qin Weibai specifically mentioned Yu Qingyan to him and said that she had infinite potential. If her character could be changed a little, she would definitely be a good assistant who was no less useful than Flaming Fire. Li Tianlan attached great importance to Qin Weibai's words almost instinctively. He did not look down on Yu Qingyan, who he met for the first time today. He never thought of trying to make Yu Qingyan his pawn. At least for now, Li Tianlan did not think he was qualified. But he, who had just entered Huading, did not mind making friends with anyone. He did not want to offend an ordinary person for no reason, let alone Yu Qingyan who had a grandfather like Yu Donglai. One day, my glory will cover the shame my father brought to the Sky Academy. At that time, I will personally engrave his name on this stone tablet at the highest place. Li Tianlan stopped looking at Yu Donglai. He took a deep breath, looked at the stone tablet in front of him, and suddenly said, You have great ambition. Yu Donglai laughed. I don't want to hurt young people, but boy, you should at least enter the 4 realms of martial arts before you talk about this topic, right? It's too early to talk about this now. Li Tianlan smiled indifferently and said directly to Yu Qingyan, let's go. He did not want to explain anything to Yu Donglai. Explaining was a sign of lack of confidence. Li Tianlan looked calm and gentle on the surface, but the pride in his bones was no less than anyone else's. Some things, especially things that needed to be carried out seriously, only needed to take action. What was the point of talking so much nonsense? Yu Qingyan, who was afraid that Brother Li would quarrel with her grandfather, quickly nodded. The two walked past the tall stone tablet in front of them and walked to the freshman reception not far away. Old man, Tianlan is not as simple as you think. This time, I can guarantee that you have misjudged him. Qin Weibai looked calmly at the backs of Li Tianlan and Yu Qingyan, who were getting farther and farther away, and said in a cold tone, no matter how difficult he is still a guy who has not entered the 4 realms of martial arts at the age of 19. Is he more terrible than His Highness Honghe in those days? Yu Donglai's eyes flickered, but he still showed a disapproving expression on the surface. That's hard to say. If I were you, I would definitely be willing to take a gamble. You followed Li Honghe to conquer the world, and the reputation of the poison doctor was well known throughout the dark world. Now your granddaughter, the little poison doctor you taught by yourself, continues to follow Li Honghe's grandson to conquer the world. What's wrong with that? Qin Weibai smiled gently. Yu Donglai's eyes flickered, but he remained silent. And over the years, you also know that some people have become more and more rampant. Don't you want to do something? Qin Weibai continued to tempt him. Her voice was sweet and soft, with a strong penetrating and aggressive nature. Coupled with her dreamy appearance, even if a woman like her said nonsense, people who heard her would subconsciously think about it seriously. Qin Weibai's eyes lit up. The other party is powerful. What can I do? Yu Donglai said lightly with a self-mocking smile. You can't do anything, but it doesn't mean that Tianlan can't. Old man, when we meet the headmaster of the Sky Academy, Zhuang Huayang, I hope you can help Tianlan once. How about helping me? Qin Weibai said while looking at Li Tianlan's back. Yu Donglai remained silent. In fact, from the bottom of his heart, he really didn't want to help. It was not that he didn't want to help Li Tianlan, but in Yu Donglai's mind, letting Li Tianlan stay in the Sky Academy quietly and graduate safely was the best protection for him. If Li Tianlan was really amazing, Yu Donglai would use all the resources available to help Li Tianlan get promoted even at the risk of his life. It was even normal for him to greet Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy. But it turned out that Li Tianlan didn't have this potential at all. He was almost 20 years old, but he hadn't touched the threshold of martial arts. This talent was really ordinary. At least in a place like the Sky Academy, Li Tianlan couldn't be considered outstanding at all. In this case, it was better to let him study and graduate safely. It was definitely not a good thing for Li Tianlan to suddenly bring him to the headmaster of the Sky Academy. Yu Donglai said that he would protect Li Tianlan from death. This sentence seemed to be nothing, but when combined with the death rate of 30% in the Sky Academy, it actually carried a lot of weight. After Li Tianlan graduated, as long as Yu Donglai was not in the coffin, he would naturally arrange a new path for him. He was still sure that Li Tianlan could live a smooth life without becoming a dark magnate or a top agent. At least with his power, it was completely possible to arrange for Li Tianlan to enter the regular army as a basic officer. Old man, don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. But I can tell you for sure that you don't know Tianlan. Some of your thoughts may be to protect him, but you think too simply of him. No matter what, Li Honghe is a peerless expert who once entered the invincible realm. If he had no confidence in his grandson, would he let Tianlan come to the Sky Academy? You don't trust Tianlan, but you can't not trust Li Honghe, can you? Don't let your kindness disrupt his deployment. Yu Donglai was stunned. What do you want me to do for you? After a long time, Yu Donglai turned to look at Qin Weibai and asked in a low voice. It's very simple. Qin Weibai's tone was flat. In the maneuver of the 2 academies a year later, I hope Tianlan can get a place to represent the Sky Academy. Do you know what you're talking about? Yu Donglai was so angry that he laughed. Don't you know what kind of place the maneuver of the two academies is? Over the years, the conflict between the two special warfare academies has become more and more serious. Which maneuver is not bloody? Those who can represent their academies are all elites. Li Tianlan hasn't even entered the 4 realms of martial arts. Is it courting death to let him participate in the maneuver? Besides, don't think that I don't know what you want to do when you go to Billy State this time. If you can come back, come back. If you can't, you will never come back. Temporarily? Do you think you have 2 lives? Qin Weibai shook her head and said, I'm not fooling you. I said I will come back, and I will come back sooner or later. Don't worry, I won't die in Billy State. I will definitely come back within a year. Damn it. Yu Donglai cursed in exasperation. I can't figure out why you like such a weak boy and are willing to take such a big risk for him. Why are you willing to take such a big risk for him? I don't like him. Qin Weibai's tone was indifferent. Before Yu Donglai could speak, she continued, Old man, go and find Principal Zhuang Huayang. Tianlan must participate in the maneuver of the 2 academies a year later. It's very important for him. He will die. Yu Donglai said calmly, even if he can grow in a year, his strength will not be too high. In that place, he can only be regarded as an ant. He won't die. Chapter 6. In Zhongzhou State with a population of 1.6 billion, if the government summarized all kinds of information and compiled a list of the top 10 domestic experts, Zhuang Huayang, the general of the Zhongzhou State military and the headmaster of the Sky Academy, would definitely be on it. Zhuang Huayang was now 70 years old, but he paid great attention to his health. His terrifying fighting strength had not yet declined. A few years ago, when a conflict broke out between Zhongzhou State and a foreign force that had been lingering on the border again, Zhuang Huayang personally took command at the border. At the moment of the decisive battle, the old man, who was in his 60s at that time, personally fought in the final battle. He alone chased the enemy for nearly 200 kilometers, killed nearly 800 special warfare elites of the foreign force overnight, and escaped unscathed. After that battle, the old man's reputation, which had been gradually declining under the suppression of another special warfare academy, the Deep Sea Academy, soared again and completely surpassed General Chen Songlin, the dean of the Deep Sea Academy. In recent years, the annual year-end maneuvers of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy had become more and more intense, and there had been more and more bloodshed. It might be because the students on both sides wanted to fight for the honor of their headmasters and deans. Zhuang Huayang attached great importance to health. Even in the Sky Academy, which was full of blood and tension, he never wronged himself. Not only that, but he also built a modern villa in the center of the Sky Academy with great fanfare, which could be called a mansion. The villa covered an area of nearly 2,000 square meters, and the surrounding area was filled with hundreds of kinds of fresh flowers, forming a large garden that surrounded the entire villa. The fragrance of the flowers could be smelled all year round. In front of the villa, there was a delicately shaped pond with running water. The water was clear, and it fed hundreds of ornamental koi fish. On the left side of the pond was a bamboo forest, opposite to the several fruit trees on the right side of the pond. Under the bright sunshine, the breeze blew, the bamboo leaves fluttered, and the flowers swayed. It was like being in a paradise, making people feel relaxed and happy. Like Li Tianlan, it was also the first time for Qin Weibai to come to the Sky Academy, and it was the first time for her to come to the residence of Zhuang Huayang, the legendary general of Zhongzhou State. Therefore, when she was led by Yu Donglai to the villa that was almost surrounded by flowers and plants, a trace of astonishment subconsciously emerged on her delicate face. Surprised, right? This old fellow's style of doing things is ruthless and ruthless. Just look at the way he does things, he's more manly than anyone else. But deep down in his bones, he likes to fiddle with these flowers and plants, saying that it can cultivate one's body and mind. When I was young, I scoffed at this, but in recent years, I've really accepted it. If it was 20 years ago, in terms of combat strength, I would definitely be able to suppress this old fellow if I used all my methods. But now, Hee, I guess it's only qualified to cause some trouble for this old guy. This guy is very particular about food, clothing, housing, and transportation. It can be said that every detail is meticulous. These flowers and plants outside are only a small part of it. Yu Donglai, who was walking in front, seemed to have noticed Qin Weibai's expression. He pointed at the flowers and plants around him and said with a smile, "How rare. Old man, you also have a moment of modesty? Headmaster Zhuang is indeed powerful, but things are different now. As he ages, his strength will definitely decline. Even if there is a gap between the two of you now, it shouldn't be as exaggerated as you say, right? It was only a hair's breadth." Qin Weibai withdrew her gaze from the surrounding flowers and plants and joked in a relaxed tone. "A hair's breadth difference?" Yu Donglai shook his head in self-mockery. "You don't understand martial arts. When you reach the level of me and Elder Zhuang, the difference between us is like the difference between heaven and earth. Even if you say it's only a hair's breadth, you're still flattering me. I'm an old guy who can't even stand firm in the thundershocking realm and can retreat to the fire-flaming realm at any time. I'm really old. I can't compare with Elder Zhuang, who is at least not weaker than the peak of the thundershocking realm. I'm not being modest, it's the truth." "Is that so?" Qin Weibai's eyes flickered thoughtfully. There was no doubt that she had a pair of extremely bright eyes. As the light flowed in her eyes, spiritual qi radiated in all directions, making her whole person more attractive. "That's true. But what old you said is also wrong. In a life-and-death fight, if I fight with all my strength, it won't take me 5 minutes to kill old you. But if it's not a head-on fight, I won't be able to sleep with an old bastard like him as my opponent." A gentle voice rang from the side of the pool in front of the villa, interrupting Qin Weibai's thoughts. Qin Weibai's expression was cold and calm. She raised her head and looked at the man who was still holding a handful of fish food in his hand. She said calmly, "Headmaster Zhuang? I'm Zhuang Huayang." The man smiled and nodded. From his appearance, no one could imagine that he was the same age as Yu Donglai. They were both 70 years old. Yu Donglai's face was wrinkled and his figure was stooped. Zhuang Huayang, however, was tall and straight with black hair. He looked energetic like a middle-aged man less than 50 years old. He sprinkled all the fish food in his hand into the pool. The koi in the pool surged and splashed. Zhuang Huayang, who saw all this, smiled more gently. He glanced at Yu Donglai and said calmly with a smile, "Old Yu, who is this?" "Qin Weibai, the little girl who learned cooking from me for a while. I've told you about her." Yu Donglai said with a smile. His eyes fell on the koi fighting for fish food in the pool, and he seemed a little absent-minded. Zhuang Huayang's eyes narrowed slightly and he asked, "Boss Qin of Pre-Qin International Group?" "That's me." Qin Weibai's tone was flat. "Headmaster Zhuang, nice to meet you." "It's my honor." Zhuang Huayang laughed and did not hide the amazement and appreciation in his eyes. "I've long heard that Boss Qin is the first beauty in Huading. I always thought it was an exaggeration. Now that I see you in person, I know it's not an exaggeration. It's obviously a modest statement." "Headmaster, you flatter me." Qin Weibai smiled politely. Her expression was indifferent, but she quietly ignored Zhuang Huayang's surname. It was a simple difference of one word, but the distance between them was obvious. "I'm not flattering you. Boss Qin deserves the evaluation of being a national beauty." Zhuang Huayang laughed heartily and said, "Let's go in and talk. Old Yu hasn't been here for a while. Boss Qin is an honored guest. Some time ago, one of my students brought some good tea. Let's have a taste today." "Headmaster, if you don't mind, you can call me Little Qin or Little Bai. Boss Qin sounds too distant." Qin Weibai followed Zhuang Huayang into the villa and said casually. Zhuang Huayang paused on the steps of the villa. With his back to Yu Donglai and Qin Weibai, his eyes suddenly became deep and distant. Calling Qin Weibai of the Pre-Qin International Group Little Bai? This kind of qualification was not something that just anyone could have. Although Zhuang Huayang was a general of Zhongzhou State, he did not think he had this qualification. The Pre-Qin International Group was a rising group in Huading in recent years. Its main business was venture investment, In terms of scale, it could be regarded as a first-tier group in the venture investment industry of the whole Huading and even Xianxia state. This rising group operated in an extremely high-profile way, but on the contrary, its boss, Qin Weibai, was extremely low-key. She never accepted any interviews and even seldom went to the company's headquarters in Huading's central building. This also made Qin Weibai, a 24-year-old woman, extremely mysterious. In the upper-class circle of Huading, almost everyone knew the Pre-Qin International Group. But when it came to Qin Weibai, very few people knew her. Only those who really stood at the peak of Huading's wealth knew that this young woman was the boss of the Pre-Qin International Group. If that was all, Zhuang Huayang could call Qin Weibai Little Qin with a clear conscience. But all kinds of information showed that the Pre-Qin International Group was only a part of the strength that Qin Weibai revealed to the outside world. It might be an exaggeration to say that it was the tip of the iceberg, but it was certain that the Pre-Qin International Group was definitely not all that Qin Weibai had. She was little known in Huading and Xianxia state, but in some specific upper-class circles, she attracted the attention of countless tycoons. And the higher these circles were, the more dazzling the mysterious halo around Qin Weibai was. Qin Weibai, 24 years old, female, born in the year of rabbit. 9 years ago, she came to Huading from a mountain village in the western part of Xianxia state. 8 years ago, at the age of 16, Qin Weibai sneaked out of Xianxia state. When she reappeared in Huading 3 years ago, she was already a strong woman with a net worth of tens of billions. What was more puzzling was that after this woman, who seemed to know nothing about martial arts, came back from abroad, she was surrounded by experts. The Pre-Qin International Group seemed to be just a venture capital group, but there were no less than 20 experts who had stepped into the 4 realms of martial arts, and this was the most conservative estimate. In Xianxia state, which had a population of 1.6 billion, how many people could enter the 4 realms of martial arts? There were not many people who could even enter the most basic chi-controlling realm. But a venture capital company had so many experts. Of course, it attracted the attention of Huading and the Ministry of State Security of Xianxia State. The investigation team of the Ministry of State Security entered Huading directly without hesitation. A senior deputy minister, who was famous for his combat capability, personally led the team. The investigation could be said to be with great fanfare, but in the end, it came to nothing. It was said that during the investigation, Qin Weibai personally went to Yuzhou, the capital, and then naturally entered the vision of the high-level officials. In less than 3 days after that, the investigation team of the Ministry of State Security completely withdrew, and the development of the Pre-Qin International Group went smoothly from then on. Even though Zhuang Huayang was a general of Xianxia state, he was still a little confused about Qin Weibai's affairs. He could vaguely sense that Qin Weibai had at least some connections in the capital, and it was even very likely that she was a big shot in the political circle. But this speculation was just speculation, and it had not been confirmed. After the investigation team of the Ministry of State Security withdrew from Huading that year, the Pre-Qin International Group had never received any help from any force in the capital. While a few people in Huading were still speculating about Qin Weibai's background, this young woman, who was only in her 20s, showed most people a series of domineering, cold, and sharp means. In general, Qin Weibai was very likely to be a person with a great background, or she could also be a woman without any force behind her. But in any case, no one was qualified to look down on such a young woman who dared to sneak out of the country at the age of 10 and spent less than 10 years to accumulate such a large family fortune. Zhuang Huayang did not know what kind of power Qin Weibai had, but he was sure that even if the power in her hands was not enough to shake him, a general of Xianxia state, at least there was no need for her to take the initiative to come to flatter him. In this way, Zhuang Huayang could almost be sure that Boss Qin suddenly came to him today because she had a request. The 3 of them entered the luxuriously decorated villa one after another. Instead of entering the study, they directly sat down in the living room. While Zhuang Huayang personally took out the tea set and added water to boil the tea, the old headmaster of the Sky Academy glanced at Qin Weibai, who was sitting elegantly on the sofa. He suddenly smiled and said, Boss Qin, you don't come to me without a reason today, do you? I like to come straight to the point, so if you have any request for me, Boss Qin, just tell me. If I can do it, I won't refuse. If I can't, I will also tell you clearly. After making the business clear, I will call you Little Bai, and I will feel at ease. Don't you think so? Qin Weibai and Yu Donglai were stunned at the same time. Ahem. Old Zhuang. Yu Donglai coughed dryly. As soon as he opened his mouth, he was interrupted by Zhuang Huayang with a wave of his hand and a smile. Old Yu, don't talk. Today is the day of admission to the Sky Academy, but I have already handled the matter of Qinyan, so I'm sure that you have nothing to do. Today, you specially came here because you were asked to be a lobbyist by Boss Qin, right? Now that Boss Qin is in front of you, what else do you need to say? Isn't it better to listen to her? That's it. Boss Qin, let's get down to business first. After that, let's have tea. Yu Donglai gave a wry smile and looked at Qin Weibai awkwardly. He said helplessly, "This old guy has such a temper." "It's okay, girl. Just say it. If this old bastard dares to disagree, I won't leave today. Since the headmaster said so, I won't stand on ceremony." Qin Weibai looked at Zhuang Huayang gracefully and said in a calm tone, "Today, I dragged Senior Yu here because I want to ask the headmaster to help take care of a freshman." Zhuang Huayang raised his eyebrows. Although his smile remained unchanged, his eyes became sharp. "Li Tianlan." Qin Weibai's tone became softer. "Why is it this guy again?" To Qin Weibai and Yu Donglai's surprise, Zhuang Huayang did not rush to agree or refuse. Instead, he frowned and said to himself, "What do you mean?" Qin Weibai's attention was suddenly completely focused. She looked at Zhuang Huayang and asked in a cold tone. Zhuang Huayang was silent for a moment and then said with a smile, "I won't hide it from you, Boss Qin. An hour ago, a big shot called me in person and asked me to take good care of this freshman. But the care he said seems to be a little different from the care you said, Boss Qin. He told me that he would train Li Tianlan hard. If he killed him, he would give my son a promotion and a raise, and I could be the headmaster for one more term. If he didn't die, he would give my son a promotion and a raise, and I could be the headmaster for one more term. I haven't figured out what he meant, but you came and asked me to take care of Li Tianlan. Boss Qin, how do you want me to take care of him? Kill him? Keep him alive?" Qin Weibai remained calm and collected, deep in thought. Yu Donglai asked subconsciously, "Old Zhuang, who called you?" I can't say. Zhuang Huayang said with a smile, but his eyes were observing Qin Weibai's expression. "Headmaster, is it a call from Zhongyuan province?" Qin Weibai suddenly asked. Zhuang Huayang's palm trembled slightly, and he almost dropped the teapot with his hand. Zhongyuan province? Yu Donglai was even more shocked. The capital of Zhongyuan province was Luojing. Although it was one of the major economic provinces in Zhongzhou state, it was not very prominent in politics and military in recent years. If there was really a person in the whole Zhongyuan province who could be regarded as a big shot by Zhuang Huayang, is it? Yu Donglai opened his mouth, but he was interrupted by Qin Weibai before he could finish. "If I'm not wrong, it should be that person. Headmaster, am I right?" Yu Donglai closed his mouth subconsciously, but his mind was full of confusion. The person in Zhongyuan province had nothing to do with the case that year. Why did he suddenly pay attention to Li Tianlan now? And he gave Zhuang Huayang an instruction that if he killed him, he would get a promotion and a raise. If he didn't die, he would get a promotion and a raise. What kind of F***king attitude was this? I don't know. Zhuang Huayang quickly put away his shocked expression and said with a smile, "Boss Qin didn't say who it was. How can I answer? Is Boss Qin trying to get information from me?" Qin Weibai smiled faintly and took the initiative to change the topic. She said slowly, "I came here today to ask you one thing. In the maneuver of the two academies a year later, I hope Tianlan can get a place to represent the Sky Academy. In addition, if possible, I also want a promise from you to keep Tianlan alive within a year." "If I promise Boss Qin, what can I get?" Zhuang Huayang asked straightforwardly. "If you can promise and do it, then I will owe you a favor. I will pay it back when the time is right." Qin Weibai came empty-handed, and as expected, she didn't take anything with her. She just gave a verbal promise. An empty promise? Zhuang Huayang laughed and said, "What if I don't promise?" Qin Weibai lowered her eyebrows, and her unrealistically beautiful face suddenly looked obedient and docile. But her words had nothing to do with being obedient and docile. From the beginning of my career to the present, as long as I want to owe someone a favor, it seems that no one has the right to refuse, even if he is the headmaster of the Sky Academy. Yudonglai's expression froze. He suddenly felt that this conversation might be bad. Zhuang Huayang didn't fly into a rage. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and gave her a thumbs up. "Good courage. I'm flattered." Qin Weibai's tone grew calmer. "Headmaster, I'm leaving Zhongzhou State tonight. I'll be back in a year at the latest. During this period, if anything happens to Tianlan in the Sky Academy, the entire Sky Academy will be my mortal enemy. I won't rest until I'm dead, including your entire family. Strong, domineering, crazy. Under the ethereal appearance like an exiled immortal, this was the real Qin Weibai. Little Bai. Yudonglai's face suddenly changed. This girl was going crazy. "Boss Qin, are you threatening me?" Zhuang Huayang's smile completely disappeared and he asked in a gloomy tone. "It's not a threat. It's just, I really can't lose or miss it." Qin Weibai looked at the boiling water in the teapot and muttered to herself absent-mindedly. Zhuang Huayang looked at Qin Weibai, who was obviously in a trance, and his gloomy face gradually eased. After a while, he said lightly, "I hope Boss Qin's favor will be as valuable as ever." "I'm sure I won't let you down, Headmaster." Qin Weibai stood up without hesitation and said, "Goodbye." She nodded to Yudonglai and went straight out of the door. This conversation could be said to end on bad terms, but she got what she wanted. At least she didn't come in vain. In the villa, Zhuang Huayang and Yudonglai looked at each other. After a long time, Zhuang Huayang smiled and murmured to himself, "Little girls nowadays are amazing." "Old Zhuang, don't think that little Bai was just joking. She was serious. If she goes crazy, it's hard to say what will happen to the Sky Academy. At least you won't have an easy time. I'm not trying to make trouble for you, but I'm just taking care of a freshman. I'll do it conveniently if I can. At least it's better than having a mysterious opponent with infinite potential, right?" Yudonglai looked at Zhuang Huayang with a solemn expression and said, "That's right." Zhuang Huayang nodded with a smile. "But before taking care of this guy, I should at least see how good he is and how he deserves my care, right? Who on earth is this little guy who can attract the attention of the big shot in the Central Plains and Qin Weibai?" Yudonglai wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, he said nothing. Zhuang Huayang picked up the phone next to the sofa and dialed a number. He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Qin Ku, there's a freshman named Li Tianlan. Pay attention to him. Find a young and promising teacher and test his strength. Remember, don't kill him. Take action tonight." The headmaster of the Sky Academy hung up the phone after he finished speaking. Then he looked at Yudonglai and said with a smile, "How about it, old guy? Stay and watch a good show today?" Chapter 7. Room 601, Unit 1, Building 1, Area A. This was the dormitory assigned to Li Tianlan by the Sky Academy. The reception work of the new students at the Sky Academy was ridiculously simple. After confirming that the admission notices in Li Tianlan and Yu Qingyan's hands were authentic, the senior sister in charge of the reception of the new students simply entered their basic information into the archive and told them their respective dormitory numbers. She did not intend to personally lead the way for the juniors at all and even skipped the procedure of giving directions. Li Tianlan was not surprised. From the very beginning, he knew that this was a special warfare academy full of cruel competition, so he didn't expect any human kindness here. He and Yu Qingyan took the free school bus to the dormitory area. After a brief goodbye at the gate of the dormitory area, Li Tianlan went directly to his dormitory. Although it was called a dormitory, it was actually a set of finely furnished apartments. The dormitory area of the Sky Academy was very large. There were nearly 30 dormitory buildings, all of which were 7-story buildings. There was no difference between the inside and outside of the building and ordinary old-fashioned apartments. There were 2 apartments on each floor, all of which had 3 bedrooms and 1 living room. Each apartment was a dormitory, and 1 person had 1 room. Compared with the situation in the outside world where 4 or 5, 6 or 7 people crowded in a room and fought for a bed, this kind of living environment where 1 person could occupy the whole bedroom was definitely quite superior. Li Tianlan's dormitory was on the top floor of a building in Area A. It was about a week before the Sky Academy officially opened on April 15th. The whole dormitory building was empty and lifeless. He, who came here first, could be said to be the only resident here. This also meant that Li Tianlan could at least choose a room he liked in the apartment as his dormitory. He was quite satisfied with this. Li Tianlan reached out, fiddled with the watch on his wrist, and aligned the dial of the watch with the sensor on the anti-theft door in front of him. The watch on his wrist was received at the reception of freshmen, which had many more functions than ordinary watches. It was a multifunctional device that integrated positioning, navigation, calling, scanning, and recording. It could be said to be the standard of every student in the Sky Academy, and also the key to enter the dormitory. In addition to the watch, Li Tianlan also received a very heavy-looking blue notebook from the reception of freshmen. Apart from that, there was nothing else. The moment the watch was aligned with the sensor of the anti-theft door, it made a soft sound, and the anti-theft door opened automatically. With a calm expression, Li Tianlan opened the door and went straight into the apartment. The interior decoration of the apartment was not overly luxurious, but it was very comfortable to look at. The whole place was pasted with light gold wallpaper. All the appliances in the kitchen, dining room, and bathroom were brand new. The real leather sofa in the living room looked a little old, but it was very comfortable to sit on. There was a TV set, a telephone, an air conditioner, a washing machine, and other electrical appliances, all of which were placed in the most reasonable position. These were things that Li Tianlan had never seen at the border. He only learned their names when he was at Qin Weibai's house last night, but that was all he knew. These electrical appliances were still in the category of high-tech for him now, and he did not know how to use them at all. Since he was the first to arrive at the dormitory, Li Tianlan unceremoniously occupied the largest bedroom in the apartment. In terms of layout, this should be the location of the master bedroom in the apartment. It faced the sea and had a unique view. The bed in the bedroom was covered with clean and tidy bedding. There was also a small desk. The surface of the desk was very clean. A thin booklet was neatly placed on it. There was even a fountain pen and ink on top of it. Li Tianlan walked over and glanced at it. It was a student code of the Sky Academy. For the time being, Li Tianlan was not interested in reading it. In the quiet bedroom, he just sat silently on the bed, staring at the scenery outside the window in a daze. A melodious ringing sound suddenly rang out. Li Tianlan did not react for a moment. After more than 10 seconds, he suddenly stood up and took out the mobile phone from his pocket. The mobile phone was bought by Qin Weibai, and there was only Qin Weibai's private mobile phone number on it. So it was self-evident who was calling. Li Tianlan picked up the phone and said hello. "Where are you?" "I'm at the entrance of the residential area." On the phone, Qin Weibai asked softly. "Room 601, Unit 1, Building 1, Area A. I'll go down to pick you up." Li Tianlan stood up without hesitation and planned to go downstairs. "No, I'm right here. I'll go up right away," Qin Weibai said straightforwardly and then hung up the phone directly. Li Tianlan's body, which was about to walk out of the door, paused. After waiting for a few seconds, the clear sound of high heels on the stairs was heard in the corridor. Li Tianlan hesitated for a moment and decided not to move. Although he admitted that he was a country bumpkin with little knowledge, he was not a fool. He could feel Qin Weibai's attitude toward him. Although he did not know what this attitude meant, at least he was sure of one thing. That was, Qin Weibai definitely did not want him to be too polite to her. In this case, he would not do anything that would invite a rebuff. The sound of high heels on the stairs downstairs became clearer and clearer. Qin Weibai's figure turned the corner of the stairs and appeared in front of Li Tianlan again. She was still holding the heavy blue notebook in one hand and a bottle of mineral water in the other. Seeing Li Tianlan standing at the door, Qin Weibai was slightly stunned. Then she smiled sweetly and said, "What? Are you going to greet me at the door? I'm not so arrogant." Li Tianlan said subconsciously and turned his eyes away. This could not be blamed on his lack of determination. In fact, Qin Weibai's charm was so great that it was almost irresistible. In particular, the charm of her sweet smile made Li Tianlan dizzy. When he was with her, Li Tianlan was almost always in a state of thirst. It was really a kind of enjoyment and torture. Qin Weibai climbed the stairs with a smile and handed the bottle of mineral water to Li Tianlan. She said, "Are you thirsty? I just bought a bottle of water. You can drink it." "I'm fine." Li Tianlan licked his dry lips and said, smelling the natural body fragrance from Qin Weibai and looking at the bottle of mineral water that was obviously drunk by her, Li Tianlan felt like he was possessed. An indescribable impulse in his heart was becoming more and more hot and clear. "Do you think I'm dirty?" Qin Weibai tilted her head and stared at Li Tianlan with bright eyes. She seemed to be smiling. "I didn't mean that." Li Tianlan looked embarrassed. When it came to this, there was really no way back. He simply did not explain and took the bottle of mineral water from her. He drank more than half of the bottle in one breath. Qin Weibai's breath seemed to be left at the mouth of the bottle, faint and faint. Li Tianlan did not know whether it was because of thirst or other reasons, but he felt that the bottle of water had an indescribable sweet taste. "Let's go in and have a look around your dormitory." Qin Weibai did not seem to feel anything ambiguous at all. She pulled Li Tianlan directly into the apartment. Li Tianlan was confused, and his mind was full of Qin Weibai's voice and smile just now. "It looks good." Qin Weibai looked at the decoration in the living room and nodded. She asked, "Which room did you choose?" Li Tianlan personally led Qin Weibai into the bedroom. On the soft bed in the bedroom, the blue notebook that Li Tianlan took back from the reception office was thrown on the bed casually. It was almost the same as the notebook in Qin Weibai's hand. Qin Weibai, whose delicate and flawless face was full of intoxicating smile, was slightly stunned. She looked at the blue notebook on the bed and her eyes were in a trance. Li Tianlan did not change his expression. "The two notebooks are very similar, aren't they?" Qin Weibai was silent for a while. Suddenly, she raised the notebook in her hand and asked, "Yes, they are very similar. The only difference is that mine is newer, and I haven't written anything on it," Li Tianlan said calmly. When he received the notebook at the reception office of the new students, he felt that it was very familiar. It was exactly the same as the notebook in Qin Weibai's hand, whether in size, color, or thickness. She undoubtedly attached great importance to the notebook in her hand. When she came out, she took it with her. When she got in the car, she held it in her hand. Even when she was eating, she put the notebook in the closest place to her. Li Tianlan was very impressed by the blue notebook, so when he received it, he thought of the notebook in Qin Weibai's hand. The Sky Academy has a hard and fast rule for all students, that is, to make weekly notes. 1 note a week and 1 note a month. The content of the weekly notes is varied. You can write anything, including the experience of training, the perception of the improvement of combat power, the opinion of the Sky Academy, and even the reflection of reading. The Sky Academy can pay close attention to the growth of each student, the way of thinking, and the political position of each student through the weekly notes every month. So 1 note a week is a must. It seems small, but it can be said that it is one of the most important tasks that the Sky Academy gives to each student. If you can't finish it, your credits will be deducted. Qin Weibai grasped the blue notebook in her hand tightly. Because of the excessive force, her slender knuckles looked a little white. "Is the notebook in your hand also the weekly notes of someone when he was studying in the Sky Academy?" Li Tianlan asked softly. "Yes, but not all of them. The curriculum of the Sky Academy is 3 years, but the weekly notes in my hand have spanned 10 years. He also studied in the Sky Academy. It has become a habit to make weekly notes, even after he left the Sky Academy." He still kept this habit until Qin Weibai's voice suddenly stopped. In a place where Li Tianlan couldn't see, a trace of complicated and sad expression flashed through her eyes quickly. "Let's not talk about this," she said softly. "Okay." Li Tianlan nodded. At this moment, listening to Qin Weibai talking about another person in an obviously unusual tone, he had a very subtle feeling in his heart. There was confusion, but more than that, there was a kind of inexplicable bitterness. Don't think too much. Many things are not necessarily what you think. Qin Weibai took a deep breath and walked to the window. Looking at the endless sea outside, she said with her back to Li Tianlan, "Now, you should think more about how to rise in the Sky Academy and in the whole of Huading. Judging from the current international situation, the possibility of an all-out war between countries is not high, but the unknown secret war will become more and more fierce. This is a competition between elites. The impact of victory and defeat is more far-reaching than that of an all-out war, and the damage to the country is greater. Therefore, in the next few decades, the status of the elites who come out of the two special warfare academies, the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy, will be more important. Tianlan, if you can seize this opportunity to rise, then the veterans at the border can live freely and go wherever they want to go. As long as you are there, no one dares to bully them. Isn't this the purpose of you coming to the Sky Academy?" "Of course," Li Tianlan said with a calm expression. "I'm sure I can get them out of that primeval forest, and it won't take long. I believe in you." Qin Weibai turned around and looked at Li Tianlan, her eyes focused and serious. She hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, "I can also tell you a piece of news. Although your father's treason seems to have been settled, this is just the surface. This case is still confusing in the eyes of the higher-ups, and there is no definite conclusion so far. If you want to investigate, there may be a lot of clues now. So, your father may have really committed treason, but it is also possible that he was framed." "Framed? Who framed him?" Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly focused. At this moment, although he was still calm, there was a hint of danger in his whole body, like a huge wave in the deep sea. The surface was slightly rippling, but the depth was already surging like a tide. "This needs you to investigate." Qin Weibai shook her head and said, "How should I investigate? Do you have any clues?" Li Tianlan asked subconsciously. "I'm just a businessman in Zhongzhou State. How can I have clues?" That matter was of great importance, and all the information was sealed. Without special permission, you can't see it at all. Tianlan, climb to a high enough position. At the very least, you have to come into contact with that information before you have the qualifications to start investigating. I'm willing to always stand behind you. As you move forward, no matter what you need, as long as I have it, I can give it to you." Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, "Thank you." Li Tianlan looked at her deeply and said in a deep voice. Qin Weibai smiled gently and shook her head. She said, "I'm going to leave Huading for a while, maybe a few months, but no more than a year. During this time, I hope you can make some achievements. Well, wait for me to come back. If you can hold your ground in the Sky Academy, then I'll agree to one of your requests. How about that?" In Li Tianlan's somewhat widened pupils, Qin Weibai narrowed her big eyes and smiled more and more softly. "I can agree to any request you have." "Really?" Li Tianlan confirmed in a dry voice. There were all kinds of thoughts in his mind. Countless thoughts crowded together, making his whole mind blank. "Of course. In Huading, people who know me, Qin Weibai, know that I always mean what I say." Qin Weibai looked proud. She reached out a small white hand to Li Tianlan and said, "Let's pinky swear." Li Tianlan walked over in a daze, reached out his little finger, and hooked it with Qin Weibai's finger. Qin Weibai's body was close to Li Tianlan. She took out her mobile phone, turned on the camera function, and directly pressed the shooting button. The two leaned against each other, and the picture of their fingers hooking was immediately taken. In the photo, Qin Weibai smiled tenderly, while Li Tianlan's expression was a little dull. Qin Weibai nodded with satisfaction and sent the photo to Li Tianlan. Then, she set the photo as the screen of their mobile phones. They had the same mobile phones and the same screen. Qin Weibai waved the two mobile phones in front of Li Tianlan. She smiled and asked, "Do I look good?" Li Tianlan nodded in a daze. "Silly, so ugly." Qin Weibai giggled and reached out to pinch Li Tianlan's face directly. At this moment, Goddess Qin, who was known for being strong and domineering in the whole business circle of Huading, seemed to have come to the world from the high altar in an instant. She also walked into Li Tianlan's heart. Qin Weibai put the mobile phone back in Li Tianlan's hand, took 2 steps back, and suddenly said, "I'm leaving." She did not wait for Li Tianlan to answer. She turned and walked out of the room directly, natural and unrestrained. Li Tianlan, who had been in a daze, suddenly came back to his senses. Without saying anything, he chased after her and said, "I'll see you off." The two went downstairs in silence and walked out of the gate of the dormitory area. On the road outside the dormitory area, a school bus was coming from a distance, getting closer and closer. You can't change the screensaver photos of your mobile phones, do you know? Qin Weibai glanced at the bus coming from a distance, turned to Li Tianlan and said, "I know." Li Tianlan smiled a little foolishly and said, "And I won't change it." "Well, I won't change it either." Qin Weibai said softly and pulled Li Tianlan's hand. "Come on." She let go of his hand, turned around, and stepped on the school bus in front of them. The school bus started slowly and went away. Li Tianlan stood there silently, watching the school bus leave. He did not move. In the back row of the school bus, Qin Weibai, who had been admiring her mobile phone since she got on the bus, put away her mobile phone and looked more and more gentle. There was a turn in front. Qin Weibai, who put away her mobile phone, suddenly looked back. Chapter 8. It was still sunny in Huading in the morning, but the weather suddenly changed in the afternoon. Over the Sky Academy, the clear sky darkened at a very fast speed. The clouds were getting lower and lower, and the air began to become dull. The Sky Academy, which was originally very quiet because it was not the first day of school, also became even quieter. The rain poured down in buckets in the evening. Li Tianlan, who had dinner outside, was wandering around. The sudden heavy rain almost instantly drenched him. By the time he hurried back to the dormitory, his clothes had been completely soaked. This made Li Tianlan both distressed and annoyed. Although the clothes he was wearing looked ordinary, the price was not simple at all. Shirt, trousers, leather shoes, and underwear. Although Li Tianlan did not have any brand awareness, he clearly saw the price of these things when Qin Weibai bought them for him. They added up to nearly 50,000 renminbi, which was a fortune that could allow him to travel back and forth between Huading and the border countless times. Wearing them made him feel as if he was covered in banknotes from head to toe. Li Tianlan could not help but care about it. But now he was completely soaked. So when he returned to the dormitory, he took off his clothes and washed them. Then, he put on the school uniform of the Sky Academy. Although it was called a school uniform, it was actually a very ordinary camouflage uniform, but the color was lighter than the camouflage uniform of the ordinary army. This thing was specially sent to him in the afternoon. There were 3 sets in total, and they were matched with 2 pairs of military boots. After changing into them, Li Tianlan moved about casually for a while and found that they fit him well. This also made his inner depression dissipate a lot. The rain outside the window was getting heavier. Li Tianlan's dormitory was on the top floor. Dense raindrops were beating on the roof, making a very lively sound. Li Tianlan, a country bumpkin who didn't even know how to plug in and turn on the TV, had nothing to do. Finally, he remembered the Sky Academy's student code of conduct on the table. The student code of conduct did not look thick, but that was compared with the weekly notebook on the desk. In fact, the student code of conduct was at least 100 pages thick, which showed that there were many things to pay attention to in the Sky Academy. Anyway, he had nothing to do, so he simply sat at the desk and opened the first page of the student code of conduct. 8 large scarlet characters immediately came into Li Tianlan's eyes. 8 words, almost up and down, neat and tidy. It became the only content on the page. If you want to go to heaven, you must first go to hell. What the hell is this? Li Tianlan was at a loss. Advice. Encouragement? Or was it the school motto? No matter what it was, just from the literal meaning of these 8 words, Li Tianlan knew that his study life in the Sky Academy might be crueler than he had imagined. Li Tianlan's heart was as calm as still water. He silently turned the page, and the contents of the student's code of conduct appeared on the second page. Chapter 1 of the Student Code of Conduct of the Sky Academy. Credit is omnipotent. Power, wealth, and deities were not omnipotent. Only academic credits were. In the Sky Academy, credits meant everything. In terms of confidentiality, the Sky Academy was definitely one of the military bases with the highest specifications in Zhongzhou State. Although it was named after the school, countless newly developed equipment, weapons, and defense systems of Zhongzhou State would be the first to be equipped with the Sky Academy. However, in addition to countless cutting-edge weapons and training bases on the island, there were also entertainment places for students, shopping malls, karaoke halls, and bars. What was even more exaggerated was that the Sky Academy even had a small playground. All these expenses did not require RMB, but credits. Here, RMB was useless. Credits were the only currency in circulation. Clothing, food, housing, and transportation, everything required credits. Similarly, the number of credits was also the only criterion to judge a student's performance. In the first month of school, new students would have 50 credits. However, none of these 50 credits could be used freely. Because even living in the dormitory was not free here. Living in the dormitory cost 1 credit a day, which meant 30 credits a month. In addition, taking the school bus back and forth from one training ground to another required 10 credits a month. The remaining 10 credits were used to buy a series of daily necessities, among which food occupied the majority. Because there was no canteen in the Sky Academy, there were only restaurants, and eating in restaurants also required credits. The amount of consumption was most directly related to what one ate. That was to say, if a student wanted to survive in the Sky Academy without any entertainment or other activities, he had to get at least 50 credits a month. Once the credits were negative and could not be made up within the prescribed time, then no matter who it was, he would directly lose the qualification to be a student, which was equivalent to being expelled. A student who was rejected by the Sky Academy basically lost his future. Credits were related to survival as well as future. The curriculum of the Sky Academy was a 3-year course, which was also a credit system. Within 3 years, any student, no matter how short his time in the school was, could graduate from the Sky Academy in advance as long as he had enough credits. 8,000 credits. This was the minimum number of credits needed for graduation in the Sky Academy. The credit rewards were basically more than 100, and there were even tasks with hundreds of credits. This could be said to be the most rewarding task, but it was also extremely dangerous. The danger did not come from the enemy, but from the colleagues. The field task system of the 2 special warfare academies, the Deep Sea Academy and the Sky Academy, was shared. Therefore, when the students of the 2 academies carried out the field tasks, they would often collide. There was only one task, so the 2 sides were bound to compete. If there was competition, there would naturally be fighting. In many cases, the students of the 2 academies fought for credits, even more fiercely than when they fought against the enemy. There was a lot of introduction about credits in the Student Code of Conduct, which occupied almost 1/3 of the content of the code. Li Tianlan's expression remained calm as he read the code page by page. Among the countless introductions to the tasks, there were 3 tasks with the highest credit rewards. The first one was the internal maneuver of the Sky Academy once a year. The maneuver began from the first stage to the end, spanning the whole year, and each stage had different credit rewards. The student who got the first place would be rewarded with up to 600 credits. The second one was the annual maneuver between the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy. The student who got the first place would be rewarded with 1,000 credits. However, the 1,000 credits might be rewarded by the Sky Academy to its own students or by the Deep Sea Academy to their students. The third task also had a reward of 600 credits, but the content of the task surprised Li Tianlan. The weekly task. He would record it every week and hand it in every month, and the credits would be issued every year, 200 credits at a time. With such a high score, no wonder Qin Weibai would say that the weekly task was one of the most important tasks of the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan shook his head and put down the student code of conduct in his hand. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the blue notebook beside his hand. He hesitated for a moment, opened the notebook, and picked up the pen on the table. At this moment, he wanted to write his first weekly note after coming to the Sky Academy, but the heavy rain outside the window was rumbling. For a moment, he didn't know what to write. At this moment, he thought of the dense primeval forests around the border, the desolate camps on the border, the high-rise buildings in downtown Huading, the dazzling shopping malls in Huading, and the long task list in the Academy's handbook. Li Tianlan's eyes were calm and deep. Listening to the rain outside the window, he sat motionless in the chair. Time passed slowly. 8 o'clock in the evening. 9 o'clock. The rain outside the window was getting heavier and heavier. The heavy rain hit the ground hysterically, and there seemed to be no second sound in the whole world. Li Tianlan, who was expressionless, took a deep breath and finally put pen to paper. At the same time, amidst the violent rain, a figure carrying a suitcase appeared at the door of the first unit of the first block in Area A. This was an extremely burly young man in his 30s. He had short hair and a rough appearance. He was not wearing a raincoat or holding an umbrella. He stood silently at the entrance of the unit, ignoring the rain as if it was nothing. He only raised his head and stared at the top of the building with a pair of bull eyes. The glaring lightning flashed across the sky, and the light instantly made his face pale. He still stood silently, looking at the only room on the 6th floor with the light on, thoughtfully. I can't believe it. I'm a teacher of the Sky Academy. Damn it, how could I sneak over to test a freshman in the middle of the night? What's Sister Qin thinking? It's too shameful to tell others. This weekend, you have to keep it a secret for me, or my reputation will be ruined. The burly young man adjusted the headphones on his ears and said in a dry voice. He was at least 2 meters tall, and standing at the door made a strong impact, but his tone was full of reluctance. You've got no reputation at all. Hurry up and get to work. Don't waste time. And Jia, I personally suggest that you'd better be careful in this operation. You don't know the background of this freshman, but he's someone that Sister Qin pays attention to. How can he be simple? If you're defeated by this freshman, tisk, it'll be a big highlight. In the headphones, a playful laugh sounded, full of gloating. Bullshit, he's just a freshman. How strong can he be? He's just a rookie. Weekend, do you want to make a bet? And Jia sneered with a disdainful look. F***CKU. You also know that the target is a rookie freshman? You want to make a bet? You're really shameless. Hurry up and get to work. Sister Qin is so patient. If you can't do it quickly... In the headphones, the man called Weekend chuckled. And Jia shook his head helplessly, sighed, carried his suitcase, and reluctantly walked into the door of the unit. At the same time, he muttered to himself, this job is really boring. It's so boring. His body was huge, but it was as light as a feather. There was not the slightest sound when he walked. His burly body seemed to be flashing in the corridor. In a few seconds, he had already reached the rooftop from the first floor. The rain on the rooftop was heavier, and the wind was stronger. The raindrops all over the sky hit in Jia's face. He just casually wiped his face, squatted on the ground, and opened the suitcase in his hand. There was a glass screen about 30 to 40 centimeters in size in the suitcase, and there was a red button below the screen. And Jia pressed the button without hesitation. Under the beating of the rain, the screen in the suitcase lit up without being affected at all. On the screen, a red figure was clearly reflected, and the figure seemed to be writing something on the desk. Good boy, you started to keep a weekly diary so early? You're quite diligent. And Jia chuckled, opened a secret compartment in the suitcase, and pulled out a golden metal stick, which was about the same length and thickness as a chopstick. He pulled the metal stick with both hands, and the metal stick suddenly extended to dozens of centimeters long. Without hesitation, Jia came to the top of the red image and plunged the metal stick directly into the ground. The solid concrete roof was like tofu, and the metal stick was not hindered at all. It directly pierced into the roof made of concrete and went straight down until the tip of the stick disappeared. The screen in the suitcase flickered. In an instant, all the scenes in Li Tianlan's bedroom appeared on the screen. And Jia's smile had just appeared at the corner of his mouth when it suddenly froze in the next second. In the bedroom below, the rookie freshman, who should not have noticed any of his actions, suddenly raised his head almost at the moment when he plunged the metal stick into the rooftop. His eyes looked directly at the roof. In an instant, Jia felt his scalp go numb, and a chill spread directly from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. On the screen, the rookie freshman, who looked delicate and weak, had already stood up. His eyes, which had been calm and gentle a second ago, had changed completely in the twinkling of an eye. Those were supposed to be a pair of clear and soft eyes, but at this moment, there was an unparalleled demonic and piercingly cold look in them. And Jia had never seen such a demonic look before, but he subconsciously sensed great danger. It was the instinctive fear of death that any life had. There was no way to escape, no way out, and only despair. On the screen, a silver metal pipe, which was less than 10 centimeters long, slipped from the freshman's cuff and fell directly into his hand. The metal pipe was evenly thick and could be held firmly by hand. As Jia's pupils contracted, the freshman below suddenly swung his hand. The metal pipe in his hand suddenly extended, and a long spear more than 2 meters long appeared in his hand. In the bedroom, Li Tianlan's eyes became more and more demonic. He held the spear with one hand, aimed it at the roof, and thrust it straight at it without hesitation. Outside the window, it was raining heavily, and thunder suddenly rumbled. The spear in the room went straight through the sky. The silver spear pierced directly into the roof. With a loud bang, a big hole with a diameter of nearly 3 meters suddenly appeared on the thick roof. Rain fell from the hole, but a large piece of the roof, which was made of reinforced concrete, was broken into countless stones, which continued to shoot into the air. Li Tianlan's figure had already rushed out of the hole in the roof. His eyes were directly fixed on Jia, who was hiding on the rooftop in a panic. Without any nonsense, the silver spear smashed the rain all over the sky and directly smashed down. It happened almost at the same second. In Li Tianlan's bedroom, tiny but extremely dazzling electric arcs began to flash at the wardrobe. The air in the bedroom began to twist slightly in a shape visible to the naked eye. A mature, plump, and beautiful figure appeared directly in the flashing electric arcs. With just a slight step, she had already appeared beside the desk. She had been standing at the wardrobe in the bedroom for a long time, but Li Tianlan didn't notice her at all. The woman's fair and beautiful face was expressionless. She was as cold as an iceberg, and there was not the slightest warmth that a human should have in her eyes. From the inside to the outside, this woman exuded a chill that kept strangers away. She stretched out 2 fingers, pulled over Li Tianlan's weekly diary that was spread on the desk, and read it quietly. There were only a few hundred words written on the open weekly diary. Li Tianlan's handwriting was not beautiful, but every stroke was full of a kind of extremely sharp edge. On the whole, there was a kind of mysterious artistic conception. The woman's eyes were focused, and she carefully read Li Tianlan's weekly diary from beginning to end. Her expression did not change at all, but her pair of eyes, which made people feel cold at first glance, slightly narrowed. "How arrogant you are," the woman said to herself in a tone without any warmth. She sneered slightly and said, "I'd like to see what you can do." Her figure flashed. In the flashing electric arcs, her figure had disappeared directly from the bedroom. The weekly diary on the desk was pushed back to its original position by an invisible force, and it was still open. On the white page, the ink on the last few lines of Li Tianlan's words had not yet dried, and the sharpness between the lines was even stronger. What rises will eventually fall. What is beautiful will eventually be broken. That you're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.